do my elevation at Penzig. So
Yeah, that's what Bumi was just telling me. Does Ansira
we're
do what's the
live.
process for Ansira?
So y'all know. We're live.
usually
Thanks,
they
man.
just call you into court and will announce, like, they'll say, like, you're getting this award, and you can either choose to get it on the spot, or you can usually or pick another event. But it's fairly, it seems to be a little less formal than some places. Like, we don't do like a writ or anything. It's just like pick an event, and then if the crown can go to that event, then they'll do it there. So.
Bumi, what is this image?
Oh, the thing that I made?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a Shiba becoming a stronger Shiba.
Oh, God.
What's up, chat? Hello.
Oh, Twitch.
We're going to get started here in the near future. I'm going to let some people come on in before we get going. Everybody in chat, say a big congratulations to John for being announced for his white belt. Congratulations. One Jonathan Drake, soon to be Sir Jonathan Drake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank y'all.
I refuse the title stack. I think it's dumb.
Master Sir John Drake. Yeah, I know.
Master Sir John Drake, the Magnificentness.
I think it sounds silly.
Especially once you start getting more of them, like gosh, what's his name? The guy that just became a quad here in Atlantia.
Oh, Sir Joss. Yeah.
Yeah, Jocelyn.
Oh.
He's quad now?
Yeah. He almost won crown too, so he would have been the first 5 I know of.
Oh.
Yep. Him.
Yeah.
Him and Rags are the two closest.
Yeah, Rags is probably the
catching everything.
One, yeah. Get all the Pokemons.
Does Rags not have Laurel? Does he have a Pelican?
Yeah, Rags has his Pelican. Duke Ragnar of Atlantia does have his Pelican. Does not.
I don't think he not have a Laurel. Yeah, no Laurel.
Whereas Joss is missing their Ducal.
Yeah. Does Atlantia give a patent with the royalty? Like, so if count, does that come with a patent of arms?
I believe it has to be Ducal. That's my understanding.
I don't know what that means.
Not single win.
So in Ansira you don't get, like, you get a county and a duchy, but you don't get a patent of arms with that award. So
gotcha.
Technically, our royal peers are not actual peers in a sense, depending on how you look at it.
Oh, I see. I think it's actually it's the same way like the rose is a peerage unto itself.
In some kingdoms that also
Ducal
they also get
is
a patent
unto itself. Yeah.
All right, hey, who's in chat? Let's see who's in chat.
Humans.
We got.
I actually don't know how to see that.
7 people.
Nice.
Everybody say hi.
Hello.
Hi, chat.
Hi, chat.
All right. This evening we're going to be doing some skill tree building for fencing and for SCA fighting / HEMA combat. I think that'll include both fencing, primarily fencing, maybe some armor discussion. We will see how it goes. But this was organized by Robert. So thank you so much for putting this idea together. And I really don't know too much about it, so I'm excited to let you take it over and explain it a little bit further. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So first off, I want to just talk a little bit about what motivated this. So I recently became the baronial fencing marshal for my group, which put me in a position to work with a lot of new people. And I learned really fast that being good at fencing does not make you good at teaching fencing.
Mm-hmm. Different skill.
Oops.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had this idea as a kind of a reference that I and other people could use to teach new people, teach yourself, fill in those gaps between what I'm thinking about oftentimes, which is the stuff I'm trying to learn, these advanced techniques, and how do we get the beginner / intermediate fencers, making progress, getting towards those advanced techniques. So that's the goal.
All right, so this is basically a lot of practical stuff, right? This is going to be, we're not subscribing to any sort of like pedagogy or any specific school of period master, right? This is just teaching people.
Yeah, that's the plan.
Complete.
Cool. Before we jump into it, I would love to do a little brief intro for each of y'all. I would love to hear about y'all's history of teaching and mentoring fencers, and like what aspects of that you feel you excel at.
Hi, chat.
Bumi, go
I am
ahead.
Bumi. For those who don't know, I'm a knight and a master of defense in the context of the SCA, as well as a black belt in grappling. And I do physical training, specifically mobility work and rehabilitation, as my primary focus in that particular vein of work. And so, with that background and that interest, I feel that I am above the median in noticing the physical strengths and weaknesses, lack of mobility, or the other physical aspects like the biomechanics of training and learning fencing, or really any sport, just because of that awareness of how the body is interconnected, and ways to make it kind of do the things you want to do. Learn to adapt your body to the stressors of combat. So that is me. Dom, you're next.
All right. I'm Dominic Wolfram. I'm a master of defense, and I'm probably, in fact, I know that I'm the oldest person on this call right now. It's not funny. It wasn't a joke.
You don't know me. I could be older than you.
No, you're not older than me. It's not that funny. Anyway, I came up and learned to teach, doing a lot of trial and error, right? So pretty much for me, it was Occam's razor when I was learning or teaching anything. Very much, I had a very competitive group of fencers around me when I was learning in my formative years. So any technique or anything that I was learning or working on, I could put through the ringer, sort of hammer it out, and if it worked, it worked, and if it didn't, it was very clear that it didn't pretty quickly, or how to improve it. And so from there, when I started teaching people, I tended to analyze very closely what their next step is, because a lot of times I would encounter them just for a day or just for a small period of time. So I always focus on what they could learn next, both physically, that they could actually physically feel and understand, both mentally and feel physically, connect that to them, but help them take the next step. I did a lot of that because I only, like I said, a lot of times you just get to pick up with a person or help or observe them. The other thing that I excel at is analyzing fighters on the go. I've won a good many tournaments, and that has been helped a lot by being able to analyze my opponents when they're doing when they're fighting their fights with other opponents. So that's where my focus is.
Very cool.
John's in the
John,
car.
do we still have you?
I can go.
Okay.
Sweet.
If you, so I'm John Drake. I'm a mod and soon to be a knight. And
I guess you are right.
I really started training people for a very selfish reason, because I just wanted to be more fun people to fight with, and fighters were more fun to fight. So I was like, well,
Yeah, cool.
I
Hey,
agree with that. It's good philosophy.
I think that, and I think that to Robert's point, teaching is 100% a different skill than fighting, and so I feel like I've tried to practice and hone that skill kind of similar to my own fighting. I think that I feel like I'm my favorite way to teach people is through video review. So like get a video of someone, and I really encourage people to film their fights, and then I really feel like I do a good job of breaking that down, because I like being able to watch it a bunch of times, and video really like reveals a lot of the sins, because you can't talk, like you can tell a student something, that they're doing something with their body, and they might not believe you or feel it. But if you show them a video, they can't argue, they can't talk back. You're like, your hand was not doing that, or your foot was not doing that. So, so I do a lot of teaching in the moment, but I also really love sitting down with people and doing video review, which is a lot of what Bumi and I do on his streams on Thursday nights.
Here with you guys, with y'all.
Yeah. So
chat. Hello.
Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of my biggest strength, I think, is video reviewing stuff.
Very cool.
Sapper, thank you for the prime. I appreciate you.
What happened?
Oh, I was thanking Sapper 18 for their
That's
prime.
Ferruccio.
That's dope. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. So good.
Cool.
I appreciate those Bezos bucks.
Bezos books.
So,
Gotta write that in.
all
All
right.
right.
Where do we begin?
Where do we begin? So I'm gonna say we begin at the bottom. I want to talk through what, day one, the first couple months, you're gonna be teaching a newbie, and
Okay.
then we'll work up from there. We'll see where we go.
All right. So looking at this chart, so is the premise we are here with
So we are
the
all
beginner
across this
side.
bottom row. So I've added, let me actually back up. So I've split this chart into
Okay.
different vertical levels. That's beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert. And then I've added some columns for different categories of techniques. Those are temporary for now. If we like them, we'll keep them. If we don't, we'll switch them up. Just figured it would be a good way to organize.
Cool.
Are we going like one square at a time and kind of going with what we would teach as like the most core part of each block? Is that like the way we want to format it? I don't know if you had a specific format in mind in terms of putting out our ideas.
Let's start with that and let's see where it takes us.
Okay. Do we begin with footwork, blade mechanics, strats, or tactics?
Let's start with footwork and move right from there. So
All right,
in the bottom left,
we're talking beginner footwork, right?
beginner
So
footwork.
beginner is like 1 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Or is that like
Okay.
a year, or how we classify beginner?
Yeah, let's put down like rough ranges. So beginner, yeah, you want to say like 1 to 6 months.
Yeah.
So you just recruited them out of your local college.
Yeah. Intermediate, I guess we're gonna say like 6 months to, I don't know, say like 2 or 3 years.
Okay. It's just like a rough idea. So we're all
Recruited them
talking about the
last
same thing.
semester. All right. So, what is beginner footwork? What do you teach them in the very beginning? Well, obviously, right, this is going to be informed a lot of the stuff that you do moving forward, right? You teach them bad footwork. They're going to have to correct it either when they get over to advanced or intermediate, right?
Mhm.
So, what is the first thing you would teach a newbie?
I think John. Yeah.
Oh, me. I would, if we're talking for going ground up, basically just where to put their feet, like a basic stance.
Stance.
Yeah.
So what would you teach them about the stance? I mean, because footwork, that technically means stance, right?
Yeah.
Footwork means moving back and forth and being in your stance.
Yeah.
So I would say, what are the key things you would teach them in the very beginning
Yeah.
about your footwork?
I would do basic stance, and then basic like advancing, retreating, work on keeping balanced. Not everyone does this, but I like keeping your weight evenly between both feet, and weight more on the balls of your feet, right? Knees bent, keeping like that springiness, and getting a feel for that. That's how I would start with someone to get their basic just movement. I probably wouldn't worry about a lunge until later. I'd probably just say like, here's how you move back, here's how you move forward.
Okay. What about you, Bumi? What do you do?
For the first bit of footwork, and I did this literally today with our local practice.
Nice.
The thing that I teach just about everybody is a simple advance and retreat small step. That's number one. Just a basic, how do you push off your front foot and your back foot to step forward and back? How do you step left and right by pushing off the appropriate opposite side foot? So you're going to step to your right, you push off your left foot. If you step to your left, push off your right foot. And then changing the gait, as in you're going to step small, and then you're going to step large forward, and you're going to step back with a small step back with a large step sideways with a small step, large step, etc. And that is the most fundamental way you can move, and to, in that movement, keep your hips and your weight centered over your legs. As in, it's not too much on your front leg, it's not too much on your back leg, it's roughly 50-50 forward, back, left, and right.
Cool. I think it's interesting that you put in the variation in step size. You said you do that like beginner, first day even.
Right away. Yep. Just the
Yeah.
ability
Oh, yeah.
to show that they can move under different circumstance.
Yeah,
And
nice.
honestly, not only is it martially sound, but it's also a safety thing.
Mhm.
if you are able to vary your gait in all directions, you are more likely to be able to catch yourself in a more out of control situation where there's other forces impacting you.
Totally.
I would say when I first encounter a newbie, the first thing I do is get them comfortable with their balance. Bumi and John both touched on this, having their balance right. I worry way less about their foot position because if they stay balanced, they can move their feet after they get a little bit of experience. The other thing that I do that hasn't been mentioned here is I ask them about any other sports that they've played or any other physical activity they've played. Like if they played basketball, right? It's really easy to take their like defensive basketball stance and turn that into a fencing stance and get them to feel the difference in their balance that way. So that's the thing I do is try to bring in any sort of other sports that they've had already.
Yeah, try to draw those connections.
Yeah,
that's a good point. What are
soccer.
some
Good.
What are some examples of like how those transfer over that you find?
So basketball, lateral movement, right? To stay in front of someone as they're defending them when they're dribbling. You have to keep balance or you'll fall over or they'll go past you, right? So I'd say, all right, move forward, stay in that stance, move backward, stay in that. Keep the same balance you had just as if you're guarding somebody. Another one is soccer, right? They have to be able to dribble and take different side steps, pick the ball, right? So if they do that, I say, okay, pretend you got that balance you need for dribbling the soccer ball, passing it, but now back and forth and stay the same distance away from me, right? Just get them to move around, like Bumi said, get them to move different stuff, but get them to draw that connection in their mind to their physicality.
Bumi, are you trying to make this column wider?
No, I was just starting to learn how this program works and trying to allow chat to be able to see what it is that we're talking about. So we're here in the beginner row in the footwork column.
Cool.
It's just hard to see both things.
These down to size. Cool. Yeah. All right, I'll leave the choice to y'all. I feel actually before we move on, are y'all good with our beginner footwork? Are we happy with that?
Yes, I'm pretty happy. It's all kind of the same overlap.
Yeah, it sounds like we're all pretty much in agreement. Do we want to go deep or do we want to change topics? Do we want to go to intermediate footwork next or switch to blade mechanics?
I think blade mechanics is important next too.
Beginner across the board. Okay. All right. So here we are in blade mechanics. Beginner, 1 to 6 months. Robert, what do you choose?
So I just did this today too because we just had a newbie at practice.
All right. Look at that.
What I like to teach people as the first day is I like to teach them the four guards. Really, the three that actually matter is second, third, and fourth. I like to teach them third generally as kind of your resting spot, and then 2 and 4 are your primary parries. That's about as far as I've gotten so far. I feel pretty novice on this topic.
But you guys go to practice.
So you say one. You said 1, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Like as in like the
yeah.
Italian.
Are y'all familiar with those numbers?
Like the Italian 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you say 1, 2, 3, 4 instead of terza.
Yes.
Okay. Quarta.
Okay. I wouldn't teach them Italian until later.
I don't look. I'm just asking for clarification. I am very system agnostic. I think good fighting is good fighting, and it shows in the context of making your way toward the end of a tournament in the context that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. I agree with you, Bumi, but I feel like one thing that I've struggled with is you need to start somewhere. And so, like, my question to you is, without giving them a particular system, how do you start them off with?
Mine's very simple. I have inside and outside high is what I tell people. I'm attacking above your waist, right, torso, head, and it's going to be either the inside or the outside. That's all I care about. So I don't say 1, 2, 3, 4. I only want you to understand I will either attack on from one side or the other, and you need to understand how to parry both things in a high line. How do you step back, right? Take that basic step back that we learned, small step or large step, depending on how much I've stepped forward, and parry the correct side, and then riposte into me. That's all there is.
So is your inside defaulting to fourth?
Yeah,
and
I
outside
teach.
defaulting
I
to
tend to
second?
teach like not full 4 and full 2.
Okay.
It would be like a hybrid 2-4. I would say, hey, try to get your true edge on, but I don't make it very strict because functionally you don't need it to be. Functionally,
Sure.
it's like anywhere between like 2 to 3 is fine. Like somewhere in between is fine. It functionally works.
I would say I would also want them. I would work on having them feel blade contact at this point,
Mm-hmm.
because there's one thing to say do it and cover it and parry it, right, and to do it once or twice, and then, but unless they can feel it and connect that with what's going on, then it's not going to. They're just going to do it wrong next time.
That's to me. I like if I impart any sort of additional onto what you're saying, like kind of your vein of thought, Dom. I might say take more of the blade toward the end of yours, end of your weapon, right? The closer you are to your guard closer to the tip of theirs, the more leverage you have, and that's the only bit I would drop in. But I think there's a lot of like finding and gaining and that nuance there within, based on like blade presence and strength, etc. That is a little bit more intermediate, and I would just very, very roughly like give them a put your guard onto their blade, and you probably win leverage wise. At least for
I
the
agree.
1/6. Yeah. Anyways.
Here's where I would always also do if we're doing blade work, right? They have to be able to extend their blade without leaning forward.
Mm.
All of them tend to like reach and lean their head forward.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's a very normal first 6 months thing. I think that to me goes back into balance, right? That is being centered, not allowing your weight to go over your feet or your knees.
Absolutely.
Is that no, Dom? Are you talking about that as part of a lunge or just without a lunge at all?
No,
Just
without a lunge,
extending
right?
Literally sticking
A
your hand out,
lot of people will just stick their hand out and say, "Oh, I can get a few more extra inches," and they'll lean forward, and that goes with them all the way until you have to beat it out of them to get them to an intermediate level. Like, stop leaning forward.
Yep. A lot of people will protract their shoulders and try to get a little bit of extra reach.
The other thing is that I haven't said either is that you want to make sure that when they're throwing, they're extending while also not leaning, but they're also making sure that their tip is traveling in a straight line and their hand is just moving up to support that straight line rather than like pumping their shot or couching their sword before they go and stuff. And like that's probably gonna happen to them because that happens to every new fighter. But when you're working with them in drills and stuff, and that's going to be like some of the first corrections you make is like smooth extension out, and not trying to get rid of hitches and pumping and all of the fun stuff that creeps into your sword even later on. But
a lot of that stuff doesn't come out until later, though. Honestly.
Yes.
But you still, when you're still explaining to them first off, you still want to be like, tip travels in a straight line, move your arm up, kind of.
Yeah.
As a caveat to everybody listening, all of the viewers, I say this if you have the chance to tailor your teaching to the individual, please do so, right? All of this is general guidelines.
Totally agree, yeah.
But
if
an individual has a better way of learning, please teach them in the way they are most apt to receive and retain the information. It's not a one size. I think all of us are speaking in generalities, not in specifics.
100%.
Yep, very much agree with that, Bumi.
All right. So in that vein, right? We usually get two kind of people here, or actually probably three. We get athletic, who are already in sports. Small and non-athletic, who's just like coming in, like just starting as their one thing that they like, or tall and or big. And each of them would have a different need as far as it comes in the beginning, especially with arm and stance, or blade work and stance.
You're saying you see kind of different trends or tendencies with those three archetypes?
Right. So, like, look, there's a big guy out here. I'm like, all right, we're gonna work on control at the very beginning, so you're not killing people.
Sure.
Right. And with the smaller person, you may have to say, all right, we're going to look on, we're going to work on actually, quick movement, actually, working fast and being aggressive or whatever. Maybe not
Mhm.
aggression, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but being willing to hit someone. I've noticed, especially with like with my partner,
Mhm.
when she first started fencing, she had a hard time overcoming that socialization not to hit people, not to fight people.
Yes. Yeah, that's pretty common.
Okay, here's something I will say. It is a bad idea if either you or your partner is a newbie for one of you to teach the other and try to hit them with a sword. Like that is going to bring all kinds of subtext in that you don't want.
It's been interesting. You're correct. I agree.
Trust me.
It has
Remember
its challenges.
remember when I said I was old?
Can we put a Venn diagram here?
Yeah, I totally want to do that.
This-
That's our lunge, right?
This or a lunge. Yep.
Yeah.
I would.
Yes.
I teach a
100%.
lunge, but I teach it small. It's not a deep Olympic lunge. I teach this is how lunging works. And it's
Oh, yeah.
when I say lunge, I usually I tell people move your foot 1 foot length forward.
Yeah, at the most.
At
Yeah.
the most, yeah, that's it. Very basic. It's not meant to, I would rather you close the distance through your stepping and then kill the person as opposed to going for this super deep lunge, even if you have the athletic capacity to.
Yeah.
But it is a good like kind of philosophical question. Is a lunge blade work or is it footwork?
The answer
both.
better be
It's
yes.
1,000
It's
both.
both, obviously.
Yeah.
All right. I guess, is everybody happy with these two things, footwork and mechanics? Is there anything else people want to add? Let the world
I'm good
know.
with this.
I don't remember what the other categories were. Would there be a place where you would talk about how to grip the sword, hold the sword?
Ooh,
Or is that-
good
that-
call.
Ooh, grip
I
of
feel
the
like-
sword.
Yeah, I feel like that's blade mechanics. Let's put a piece in for that.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting? Unless they ask, I don't point it out.
Really?
Because I don't think it matters in the first 6 months. They're going to do what's most comfortable to them.
I'd
And that's
be
fine.
open to that being true. That's I will usually give people kind of a basic. I'll be like, you just don't want to, as long as like you just want to make sure they're not hammer gripping it, right? Like if they're just
Yes.
making a fist, then they literally can't point the sword. Like the sword can't be extended, right? So just kind of tell them to like hold it loosely.
That is, however, a good sub thing to talk about, especially if you notice them doing something that might be detrimental.
Hold on loosely.
Yeah.
Some people do the point thing right away. Some people do single grip, double grip,
Yeah.
pinch.
That's true, yeah.
As we've looked at for our
Right.
grip.
You know what? That's
episode.
true. I don't know that.
We did a whole stream on
The
this,
whole
didn't we?
stream on it, yeah, it was very interesting.
yeah?
People do very different things with their grips,
Yeah.
like wildly
And,
different
um,
and still successful.
Right. And a lot of people are really dogmatic about their grip style, and I really
Sure.
don't think it
Yes.
matters at
It's
the end
very
of the day.
personal.
I know what's uncomfortable and comfortable for me. I mean, I'm very very strict in that.
I
Yeah.
do think there are objective grips that have a better purpose, depending on both a combination of the weapon and the goal. Like if your goal is to deliver a cut with force, there's going to be a better grip than another.
Oh, sure.
Versus a thrust with minimal force.
Oh,
and
yeah.
those are different goals in different contexts.
Well, okay, but I started out in epee, right? And I started holding an epee with my finger pointed like at my opponent, holding it that way. And then when I went to heavy rapier, it basically turned into a pistol grip.
Single trigger
Yeah,
at the top
single
knuckle,
trigger.
top knuckle or second knuckle.
Both knuckles, two
Two
fingers.
knuckles.
in each
So
of the trigger.
proper pistol.
So do you do 2 fingers over the quillion, Dom?
Two, yeah.
Oh, you do
Yeah, yeah.
two. I also do a
Yeah.
double grip. I do double grip but tight. A tight double trigger.
A lot of really good fencers do the double 2 fingers over, and I hate it
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, you're
What do you
you're
do,
a
John?
single finger.
I do like single finger point my finger down the
Yeah.
ricasso.
Yep.
Kind of.
Okay.
Wow, really? Okay.
Yep.
I think
For most
I
of
do.
the time. In single sword, I'll take a little bit more of a stronger grip because I need more blade control. Versus sword and dagger, I'm more willing to. But I've also just gotten like when I first started fighting that way, I didn't have as much blade. Like I could throw a straight shot pretty well, but I got my like lost control side to side, and as
Mhm.
my hand got stronger over time, I've I've gotten it back to where it's pretty close to where I can do most of what I want, even with that grip. And then if I need to do something else,
You
I
know,
just
we maybe should save this discussion for when we get higher in the
you're right.
You're
That's a good
out.
point.
I think that's also why your outside parry with your sword is weaker.
Oh
Like,
yeah, no, it's a
mechanically.
trade-off.
There's a trade-off.
Definitely a trade-off.
Yeah, this is
All right.
intermediate to advanced conversation.
yeah, we
Yeah.
mentioned up the levels there.
We'll come back to that. Before
It's
we move
hard
on,
to keep it basic.
one question I want
Uh-huh.
to bring up for the basic lunge. Bumi, you were saying you teach a small single step lunge.
1 foot length. Yeah.
Do you focus on the order of the actions, like that arm lean lunge thing? Do you think that's important?
I think it is only important if they the individual are showing something well outside of the bell curve. But if not, I leave it alone. Like I'm not very dogmatic about must extend arm and then throw or have it happen about the same time.
I would say as long as they're landing the right way, right?
Reasonably.
As long as they end up in the right spot and they're reasonably effective with it. At this point, getting up higher, then you would look at streamlining it, streamlining it to be, all right, your foot's moving too quick or your hand's going late or something.
Yeah, I feel like that's the only place that it can be a problem is if your arm is lagging behind, if you're entering the space before the sword is.
I don't think it matters.
Or you could do
month
it on
1 through 6.
purpose. Sorry.
What'd you say, Bumi?
I don't think it matters from 1 through 6. Month 1 through 6.
Yeah, fair enough.
Honestly, like I don't.
I mostly agree
Even
with
if they
that.
honestly, in that time frame, what I care about is that they're safe for themselves and for others, and then B, that they're having fun, whatever that looks like for the individual. Because it's
Robert, I don't know. I've never fought you, Robert, but I will say that Boomy, John, and I are going to be on the extreme end of the smaller lunge.
that is true.
As far
yeah.
as that goes, like there's going to
We
be
do
people
jump
who would say,
lunges, not deep lunges.
people would say, there's people who are going to say, no, you have to learn this first, right? So for chat, like there are going to be people out there who say it is very important, just as much as your stance, to get this lunge down at the very beginning.
Right, a medium or deep lunge, correct.
If I lunge, I feel like I'm out of control and I shouldn't have done it. You know.
Interesting point of view. It makes sense though. Like you can do most of the things you need to do with a lunge with a step.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
That's my goal.
Would rather
That's my goal.
would rather them step. Would teach that first, in my opinion.
Cool.
Yeah, I kind of think of a lunge as maybe an intermediate technique.
More honestly, physically speaking, from a PT perspective, more people can step and extend their arm with a tiny lunge by far than people can do a deep lunge. There's a lot of people who cannot do a deep lunge month 1 through 6.
Really?
Absolutely. For a variety of reasons, but it's essentially boils down to the physical inability to.
Right. So this may have been because I was doing epee when I started, right? So one of the things that I would do was just lunge and then stop and continue fighting in the lunge without recovering, right? And I would do that a good bit. I feel like that's like a bad technique, but at the same time, it was easy for me to do as a beginner. Just like
you had the athletic background though.
Parry post.
You are well above what I would say is the mean physical capacity of an average Scadian fencer.
Fair enough.
Like by some amount.
And I assume that was true when you started, but I mean, I don't know for sure.
That was 20 years ago.
Yeah, I assume that it's very true when you're starting because that's just how.
I'm actually a lot bigger now than I was then.
Sure.
Got swole.
So does that make doing that, like, would that make lunging and holding that harder or easier? So you're stronger, but
I was lighter. It was easier. I was lighter.
Easier. Okay.
What is this next category? Tactics.
So I have 2 more on here that I'm very loosely attached to. We have strategies and tactics. If y'all have ideas for other categories, absolutely happy to swap.
What's the orange one?
The orange one is tactics.
And strategies.
Let's see here.
Strategies
in blue. Tactics.
Strategy and tactics are different categories.
I think those are terms that are close enough that they can be condensed into one.
Yeah, I would say that's one column there.
And secondarily, I would not in any way really mention that to a 1 through 6 monther.
Sure.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know that the basics of strategy and tactics there are basics of those concepts, but they are not basic fencing concepts.
Yeah, I would not phrase it under those categories. And be like,
where would you put a disengage?
Oh, good question, Tom. is that blade work or is it that a tactic?
To me,
I
that
think
is
that's
blade work plus footwork.
a
It is.
disengage is work.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. You should be stepping. If someone lunges at you, you don't just disengage. You step
that's
back and you
true.
disengage, and then you now you have control of their blade. Now you can step forward and re-engage.
Yeah.
Everything is footwork.
Depends. I mean, yes, but the disengage
I
component is
but you
just blade action.
you can practice a disengage in a vacuum though.
Is
Yes.
it useful in a vacuum?
For strength.
For
sure.
for strength.
Control
Yeah.
For
stuff.
mechanical.
Everyone
Control
wants
your
to-
control your sword.
The
In a
disengage around the
vacuum,
doorknob,
it's
you know?
here in sword work mechanics.
Yeah.
I-
In first 6 months, like people try to do a disengage and they do a windshield wiper, right? Like it's
Oh, yeah.
you gotta build it up.
yeah, it's big. If you wanted to add another category for me, just me, and y'all are welcome to chime in. Let me know what you think. But categorically, I would, for me, I would separate out another category called time and space. People will call it measure,
Ooh.
but to me,
Sure.
like space is time. You know, the more space you have, the more time you have to do something. So you can call it
Yeah,
measure. You can call
measure
it
and
time
tempo
slash
or-
space.
It's literally the definition of measure.
Yeah.
You want to just say measure and
Measure is
timing?
fine if people want to call it that. But I connect those two because people sometimes separate out tempo differently than measure. But to me, it is
Fair enough. Yeah,
it is
that's a good point.
not different. It is essentially the same thing and too close to have to separate.
Yeah. Sure. Hey, what would you put in
I
that?
kind of think there is value in separating them, but separating them and as you describe them, basically telling someone they're different but they're the same. I don't know. I find that
Mhm.
helpful in a weird way. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
I think so for in the context of the beginner, right? Like they gotta realize when they're at measure and when they're not. That's like day one.
Yes. Yes.
All right. We have a question from chat.
Okay.
I'll let everybody answer. Is this discussion referring to single fighting only? What do you picture in your head? In my head, yes, primarily.
That's what I was imagining as
Mhm.
well.
Dom,
I had not thought about it.
yeah, I haven't thought about it either.
No.
I think all the stuff we've discussed so far applies to single or really any weapons form.
Yeah, the stuff we talked about so far, it applies to everything. But I think as it moves up, it's going to end up more single, like tournament
Yeah,
or
and
duel.
I think as we go up, we'll probably end up more specific in that we talk about, offhand parries.
To
and
me,
stuff.
tactics falls into more melee, honestly.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
a
we're
term.
talking. Do we mean single sword or single is in one-on-ones? Like tournament fighting versus melee fighting, or single sword versus?
Oh, definitely. I was thinking like one-on-one fighting.
What I
That is
assume
the-
the question is, but
Oh yeah, that's
know.
a chat.
Single sword.
From 71 do you mean single as in 1v1 human, or do you mean single weapon? Because that's a good
Or do you mean like
clarification.
not dating anyone?
I assume it's not the latter. Oh,
never
we'll let Chet answer. All right.
Swipe left on lunges.
Would to the panel? Would any of you teach something in measure and tempo and or time here? What
Sorry,
up,
say that
Billy?
again.
I appreciate the prime. Thank you, Billy.
It is really disturbing right now.
As in 1v1 or melee, like single.
Yeah, definitely.
combat.
I think melee is,
single.
Yeah.
melee is
Melee's
out of
just-
scope.
Melee is out of scope. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not gonna be able to.
Yeah.
That could be a whole different one.
That's
for
a
sure.
different.
Yeah,
that's a
that would be an
different stream.
interesting skill tree to build.
essentially a lot of what we're going to discuss would still apply to a melee fighting.
Yes.
Like if you could parry well, lunge well,
Measure
you know,
control, so forth.
measure control.
Yeah.
All of that's still going to apply when you're fighting in a melee. It's just multiple. You're going to have multiple opponents to worry about. So
Yeah, it's kind of but like you can do a really deep lunge, but don't. Okay, you're in a line, you're gonna get hit by 3 swords,
Yeah.
so don't
Yeah.
do that.
And a spear, at least a spear, maybe 2.
At least a spear. Someone throwing an arrow at you
Yeah.
from the side or a beanbag.
Okay. Does anyone have anything to put under measure and or tempo for beginner? 1 to 6 months.
Beginner.
Beginner. I feel like it's really important for people to grasp like what the range they can hit someone at is. What the basic
Yes.
measure is.
They need to know basic measure at this point, I would say. Basic measure, meaning I can extend my sword or have to take a step and extend my sword. Like just the difference between those two things. And they need and this one I would say they probably how should we say, like, they need time in the mask, right? You can't
Yeah.
just tell them and drill it. Like
Yes.
they need to be in here experiencing it at this point.
For those who want to train this into your newest people, the thing that I personally do a ton is I'll grab somebody, put them in front of me, have them reach out with their weapon, and just full extension front and touch me, and that's our starting measure. And I'll say, okay, I'm going to step forward 3 times, and I want you to step back equal to what I step forward. And then after 3 steps, I'll do it very slow at the beginning. They'll reach out their sword. They'll either be correct or too close or too far, and then we'll make an adjustment. And over time, I'll add in back steps, a mix of the two, and an increasing speed and increasing dynamic gait in my step to make them have to change their steps.
And so your goal there is to teach people to maintain distance.
Right, just to be aware of how to maintain distance, measuring off of their visual response to where my torso and hips are.
I like that.
Okay, so can we sidebar here real quick? Because here is where you just hit on the way that I teach almost everything to a newbie, or even an intermediate. Is I would never, like, this is just a Dominic-ism, is I'd never give them static drills to do. I would never tell them go disengage your doorknob for an hour or whatever, or anything like that. I would get them to do it disengage. I'd get them to do it a bunch of times with me live. Then I would go faster and faster and slowly increase the speed until we're getting to a fighting thing, just the way you described it. That's the way I teach almost everything that we've talked about here to a newbie. I don't know how you guys do it, but like I don't really don't do the static teaching thing, right?
Yeah.
Lunge and hit the wall. I would just do that maybe 1 or 2 times, and then actually have them do it slowed a bunch of times, do it intermediate, faster a bunch of times, and faster a bunch of times, so we get to like fighting speed a bunch of times. That's the way I teach most everything that we've talked about so far here. I don't know what you guys. I don't know what you guys do, but that's just the what's been worked for me in the past.
Yeah, so I personally do not enjoy drilling. I think drilling has its place, but I think that it's maybe 10% option for training. I think most things can be taught in a more fun way.
It has its place far away from me.
Yeah, it really depends on the student, because there's some people who seem to really, they just want to spar a lot, and so then you just kind of teach them through sparring is in essentially the way Dom is saying, like where you just are sort of like you're doing kind of like live exercises. But then there's some people, or sometimes you end up with a thing where someone seems to have a block with a concept, and so then I would want to go and like work on that specifically, to break down like for example, my newest student, Drew, that I'm working on, we're working on like a longer lunge, and I was like, to get the maximum length out of your lunge, you have to like profile your hips, and she had a hard time doing that, and so we spent like about an hour just kind of workshopping like why she was having a hard time with that, and worked on that. But like that was because it was a specific issue she was having that we needed to like
Sure.
really
static has
dig
value,
into.
but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but that was kind of more on case by case basis rather than like in general.
Hey,
so
what level on this chart here would you say Drew is though?
Intermediate, probably.
Intermediate, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And like I said, I consider a lunge an intermediate technique. So. But,
Okay.
Or at least the long lunge. Like the short lunge, probably right. The long lunge, definitely intermediate to advanced technique, really.
You know what? I want to throw out a little bit of my philosophy on fighting from a grappling point of view. I don't think, like, people talk about like a beginner action versus a intermediate action. I think everything is just an action. The complexity is usually built off of fundamentals, right? Things are built from the bottom up. You understand how to step forward and back, and then you understand how to parry inside and outside high, and then those things mix together. So like a complex action is just a bunch of simple actions done in a way and in the right time to make it complex. So I don't really like the idea of like this is an intermediate action or this is an advanced action in really anything. I still use the most fundamental beginning things all the time.
But even if they're building off of each other, right? If they're building off of each other, you can't pick like the third block until you've got the first 2 blocks in place, right?
Right, absolutely. It's like it's additive, like this is
right. So if they're additive, and someone says, "I need to work on this," and then you went, "Well, you need to do the 2 fundamental things first," then I would say you've chosen an intermediate action where you should be working on the beginner.
100%, absolutely. Yeah, it reduces down to this stuff for me. All the
Okay,
time.
sure. Okay.
I mean, I mostly agree with Bumi, but it gets really pedantic if you kind of go into it.
Yeah, that's fair. I get it.
That's very true.
But it is, it
Yeah.
is
What are
definitely
we
how
doing?
like the framework is in my head.
Yeah,
Yeah, totally.
but arguably what we're doing right now is
I suppose
overthinking.
it's a pet peeve where like people are like, this is an advanced jujitsu thing, and I'm like, it's not.
Oh,
It's
okay,
just
okay.
a bunch of fundamentals stacked together. The principle's the same. You bend the person in a way they
Yeah.
can't, and you break them. That's the goal. Or you cut off their blood to their head. Like it's very
Hit 'em with
simple.
the card. It's pretty easy.
Easy.
Yeah, okay, sure, totally. All right.
But I think that especially with beginner level people, if you give them the big picture like you were just talking about, it's not very actionable. So
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
it's really helpful to break it down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
So what's something you had someone go from the like had an intermediate action and have to break them down to the lower building blocks? Anything you can think of?
who are you asking?
You.
Absolutely. Sometimes people want to do, say, for instance, I describe, okay, what they ask me, what am I doing to them to beat them? I'll say, I am stepping forward, presenting a high before I actually throw, dropping low. And then when they talk about it, like, how do I deal with this? The first thing I will do is see, can they step back reasonably well? And if they have trouble keeping their balance, taking a step back, none of their blades matter. If they literally can't stay balanced as they take a step back and do so comfortably. And that to me is like immediately stop all the other stuff. I want to keep hitting you, and so is everybody else in this action, because you can't step back in a way that is efficient and safe and balanced. That's a simple example.
Cool.
okay, back at it. We're
Yeah.
in measure and timing. Do we have anything else we want to put in this spot?
For new people?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for new
beginners.
people, beginner, measure, and timing.
Nothing for
For
me.
basics,
I would-
Alex,
Let's see.
I like this.
I would say also I would modulate their speed here.
Ooh.
Focus on their speed, because a lot of people will either go not fast enough or would also try to go too fast. So I would say get them to be in control when they're working on these things, because their speed can go up and down.
Do you mean
It's
like
like-
they're too fast and so they're performing the action poorly and thus we need to slow it
Correct.
down? Okay.
Correct.
I-
Not that they're going, not that they need to be going fast or slow, but they're going too fast or too slow depending on the person.
I will
I would say
I will
that
throw something
tends to happen.
in that vein. If we had a Venn diagram that can cross all four of these things,
Mhm.
I would put something that said practice is permanent or practice makes
Mhm.
permanent. Anyone who's done this for any amount of time understands that if you repeat an action enough times, your body adapts to it, both neurologically and physically. And so if you have a bad habit and you do that a bunch of times, you're practicing the bad habit and you become very good at that bad habit.
I can do this shitty move anywhere.
Right. Yeah, I'm so good at it. And so people, I think one of the things that it would be, that to Dom's point, that transcends any one column is when you're practicing, you want to practice ideally. That is why coaches exist in every sport.
Yeah.
It is not because they can do it better than you. It is because they can tell you, a good coach can tell you how to do it in an ideal manner in context. And then your practice becomes way more valuable. You're not practicing the wrong thing over and over. You're doing the correct thing.
So let's talk about this. I mean, we've all been in practices and stuff. And we've seen people practicing things that are bad, right? They're actively incorrect,
Mm-hmm.
right? And at some level, there's a trade-off of, yeah, if they keep doing this, it's going to lead to bad things down the road, versus it may not be worth fixing right now.
Yeah,
You know what I
absolutely.
mean?
Yeah, that's true.
It's a tough one to look at, right?
Mhm.
And Dante and I used to go back and forth on this all the time. Like, look, should we fix this person who's doing this thing? Well, no, it's not really that bad, and it won't be bad for another 2 years or so. Or is it gonna end up, destroying their knee cartilage, in 2 years, kind of thing, right? So, have you guys ever come across that?
100% all the time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
constantly. That's what
For
a
sure.
teacher's life is figuring that out.
It's a hard line to walk.
How do you approach it? Or is it case by case more than anything?
Case by
Really,
case by
I think
case.
it's really case by
Yep.
case. Sometimes it also comes down to you just like when you're working with someone. Sometimes they're doing a lot wrong, right? And if you go to them and you're
Pick
like,
your battles.
footwork's bad, you have to pick one thing.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
like otherwise it's
Yeah.
too overwhelming. So you have to pick the thing that you think is the most will have the best. Usually, you want to pick the thing that you think is the biggest issue or will
Yep.
have the most
What do you
benefit.
want to put work in? Yeah.
Um, and or if it's a health thing, like right, like if you think they're hurting their knees or they're somehow a health joint or something is an
Yeah.
issue, then you probably want to fix that first. But that's a hard judgment call, and you have to just play that by ear, I think.
Absolutely. I think the one generality to it, John, you mentioned, is that you can't just info dump on people. Like you have to give them one, maybe two things at a time.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I still generally like to try to find something they're doing good to give them a compliment to in general.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's way more value. Well, not way more, but I would say that there's value to saying, okay, fix this, and you're doing this well. Lean into it. Like
Yeah.
having
You
both
wanna-
of
you're
those
not-
in the same conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're trying to make someone not feel bad about themselves, but also like it's good to know if you're doing something correct, you want to know that too, so you can keep doing it.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
like
something Raphael from out in Chicago likes to talk about is
R2.
finding your area of excellence. And I think that's such a useful thing to understand in fencing.
You know, that's something I heard the other day. I was listening to a podcast. This is totally random, where a guy was like, "You hear all the time that you should follow your dreams, right?" And he's like, "Bullshit. You should follow what you're good at
Mm.
and do that, turn that into something valuable. Then you can dream after you're done with that."
Yeah.
That made me think of that. Like, hey, you know, what are you good at? Do that well. Also the basics, but do that well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree. I think that would be an intermediate. Like getting from intermediate to advanced is probably kind of figuring out what parts of fighting you're good at and learning how to like emphasize those more.
All right, so we happy with beginner here? We want to move on to intermediate?
Yep. Pretty happy.
I'm,
Yeah.
You all happy?
Yeah.
All right.
I'm
I'm
very.
pretty happy. Let's do it.
Intermediate.
All right, let's talk about intermediate footwork. What kinds of things
Intermediate. I would say intermediate. I would call precision the biggest one here.
I add in very specific things.
Okay.
So in beginner it is small step, big step. We are now adding a forward cross step, a back cross step, a forward jumping lunge, and a backward jumping lunge, or like a backward jump, not a lunge.
What is that jumping lunge that you're talking about?
If you imagine, if I did a deep lunge towards you, instead of deep lunging, my front foot would cover the same distance, but I would be bringing my back foot with me to land in such a way that I'm essentially in my starting guard.
Got you. So you're talking like a
jump
lunge
step.
combined with an advanced, like a very large advanced step.
I usually
Yeah,
call
it's
it
an
a
advance.
gather lunge. It's either a long advance or I call it a gather lunge, or sometimes call it
Yeah,
a
I call it
dynamic
jumping lunge,
Jumping lunge is also
Forward.
a fine name.
but like a jump forward, jump back.
I just call that an advance.
It's a long advance.
For me, in intermediate, I think you should hone in on making sure you have all of your possible footwork that you're going to do, like compass steps, etc.
Yeah.
Built
I would add
in
in more.
and
I would add in
done.
some of the variants on steps I teach. So like I would start teaching a replacement step here. I would work on getting people to lengthen their lunge. Not
Mhm.
necessarily. I'm not saying you should do your longest lunge all the time, but start figuring out how far you really can lunge and at least in a static situation, like maximizing that, and then
Yep.
it's easier to dial that back at that point.
This is the time for limit testing.
Yes, that would be my opinion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, how far can you lunge with can you do like with your back foot? You know, what I call a static lunge. Traditionally, your back foot stays. With the jumping lunge, how far can you go? You know, kind of playing with those things in fights and in static. And I also, I know we talked about not liking drilling as much, but I find when I was really at my most dedicated to fencing to like really increasing my game, I did a lot of footwork drills, and I really thought of it as conditioning. Like I was like,
Mhm.
I was just working on strengthening my legs.
100%.
So like, hundreds of lunges and advances across
Mhm.
the way. You know,
I will have my direct students I will roll out a tape measure, and we'll be testing what you can do, and then add strength and balance training, and then improve those metrics over time.
Oh yeah.
Not because I need you to be a long jumper, but you have the capacity to explode as you need to in combat. In every
So this is
direction.
where you add in conditioning.
Oh yeah, definitely. If they're like a serious intermediate versus like a casual intermediate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my idea behind this is if someone is really trying to get good at fencing, what are they going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Condition. Yep.
I assume I assume we're talking about anyone who's like the purpose of this exercise is to figure out how to help someone who is very dedicated.
Yeah.
From a
That's
basic,
right.
intermediate, advanced
True.
level, right?
You could be stronger
Mhm.
with your forward jump.
So
We can measure it.
What's that?
Yeah, I'm talking to Drew. Drew in
Oh,
chat.
Drew, yeah. She is in the chat.
Uh-huh. Yes, Dom.
So would we call? I would say that a lot of times heavy fighter crossovers kind of drop into the intermediate area right here.
Oh, like by default?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Either by default or very quickly.
or very quickly. Anyway.
I think if they're a shiv, their footwork is probably at least intermediate, if not advanced, depending on the person.
Yeah,
But their blade
honestly,
work is
it's-
probably closer to somewhere beginner to intermediate, somewhere depending on their personal sword
Yeah.
work.
All right, thoughts on our intermediate footwork here?
what are
Yeah,
we?
we think-
Is that a cat?
There's a baby in my background who's a
Okay.
little upset. Trying to mute the most of it.
No, that's fine. Not very noticeable.
You better feed your cat. Okay. What are we limit testing?
Yeah, so John or Boomy, you were talking about testing people's lunge length. John, you were
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about this too. Would you talk about it more?
You want to go, John?
Yeah, so I would like, and I specifically did this in my student Drew, who's in the chat here. Is like,
Drew Marion Grace?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so like we got a pal, and we're like, how far, like, physically, if your back foot is here, and you stretch out, you can hit the pal from here, and so let's practice doing that. So like, let's just really test to see how far you can get, and then work on your strength and flexibility so you can do this consistently. For her, it was more strength, but really just also trusting the lunge, right? And when I drill lunges, I drill them as far as I can go to work on that for the conditioning aspect, because it's easier to dial that back in a real fight. So that's kind of the limit testing we're talking about. Is like, okay, how far can you get your lunge to be? And then once you've done, you can do that, and then with the lunge or your back foot's touching the ground still, and then you can start adding in a jump lunge, where you're like, well, how far can I go with this type of lunge, which is actually even farther because you're leaping a little forward, and then that way it's a great workout because you're conditioning your legs, and then you're also just kind of figuring out, it's like, oh, I can actually reach out and hit them from this far, and you're kind of starting to figure out that like a fight can start way earlier than a lot of people at the intermediate level. You're starting to realize a fight can start farther away than you realize.
Yep.
Even if you're not necessarily always going to do that really extended lunge, because it's a big commitment and it's easy to get punished for doing it, you should still kind of know that it can be done and that you can do it, because there's times where you will do it. Especially if you're a shorter fighter, you kind of need to maximize the range you have if you're shorter.
For shorter fighters, I was talking with somebody who is intermediate today, and we're talking about advice and their fight, and they're very much on the very short end of humans as adults. The footwork was where I went back to. The idea is that she needed to be able to step forward, maybe 2, 3, cross step forward, jump lunge, and mix those forward actions after stepping back and parrying, because they had the step back parry down, but their inability to advance was the issue, and they tried to, like, their immediate reaction is to step back parry lunge as the riposte. And a lunge from someone who's
up short,
very short, it just doesn't do squat in function against a much taller opponent.
Well, so in my opinion, by this point, okay, for me, right, when I was here intermediate, right? I was working on being able to advance just as fast as I could run.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
because
And a different
I
tool.
was fighting a ton of tall people, right? I was fighting Alejandro. You guys don't know Alejandro, do you?
Nope.
Um,
Who dat?
he's in South Carolina right now. Fights with a buckler and like a saber, kind of a
Oh,
Saracen
I
kind of thing.
actually do know who that is.
Yeah,
Someone
he
that
was
I've
he
never
was
met him or
uh,
fought him. I know who you're talking about.
Sir Christian, Connor, Adon. They were all like tall dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all 6-footers, roughly.
Yeah, over like 6'2" was probably about the average, right? So I was, in order to fight them, like I had to be able to move forward as fast as I could run, but in an advance, like in stance.
Mm-hmm.
So I would be like, at this point I would just put, yeah, limit testing as far as speed, finding max speed. Okay, you
Yeah.
got it. Yeah,
No, I like
Yep.
that too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it's
So
like
we
the
used
same.
we would do like footwork races, right? Where it's like you have to do an advance. You can't cross your feet, but who
Sure.
can
I love that.
cross the field faster?
Footwork
Yeah.
races. That's fantastic.
Did you have a question, Robert?
Dom, just for from context for me, how tall are you?
I'm 5'9".
Okay. Okay. So you're like average-ish, maybe a
I'm
smidge above
the
average.
average American male.
Cool.
Exactly that.
I think I'm the shortest one on this call.
John, you're 5'7"?
I'm 5'8", 5'7", 5'8", something like that. In that
Okay.
range.
He's got like
He wears-
5'4"
he wears-
energy.
What's that?
Chris, what? What did you say to me?
Oh, he's got 5'4" energy.
5'4". That's
Does
so
have that
rude.
short person tenacity. I'll
That's
bite your
insane.
ankles.
I
I
hate your
will.
foot so much. It's so close to me.
Savage.
I think it's pretty good. That would
Yeah, I
be
think I-
additive to the beginner stuff, certainly. But
Yeah, absolutely.
Is
John,
that a cat?
no, it's still the same baby.
Okay.
They're having a bad time. Do we want to put in the that heel tap lens that you like, John? Do you think that goes in step
Oh yeah,
variants for
I would add
intermediate?
that to an intermediate thing. Yeah.
Oh,
Do you not like it?
okay. Okay.
Dom just doesn't like lunging, so.
I don't like lunging. Well, I like
But
other
Dom
people
lunges
lunging
more
because
than-
then I will kill them. So then.
Dom
fine.
lunges more than they say they do, so that's also a thing.
I don't lunge hardly at all. Shut up.
This is just propaganda, so people aren't ready when you lunge.
Dom does
I-
much more of kind of, in my opinion, much more of sort of these long advances.
Sure.
But he does much more like small, quick steps
Yeah.
to create pressure,
Mhm.
and then usually gets his opponent to overextend into him,
Mhm.
so he doesn't have to lunge at them.
Sure.
all things
It's-
true.
Well,
Verify.
they will also attack me anyway, right? Like, so I know they're going to attack me, so I may as well be in the right position.
Yeah. It's like why do the work for them, right? It's,
Well, I mean that still comes from being the short person in the big game, right? Is like, for me, I didn't really start having success until I broke the fight down into two sections. One was get into range, and the other one was attack, right? So I literally have to parry and advance into range. Okay, then now the fight kind of starts over, and I would have to have a second or third intention when I got there, and the fight would literally start over. I would throw a shot, they would parry, I would riposte, and that kind of thing. So once I got there, so it was like a two-stage thing: get to range and then fight. So that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah.
And if I lunged, I was dead every time, right? Because I wasn't going to hit him.
that makes sense, yeah.
All right, shall we move on to some intermediate blade work?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Intermediate blade work.
Intermediate blade work. Get a stick.
Get a stick. Yeah, I guess this is the time where
Get
you
offhand.
want to start
Choose
handing
offhand.
someone offhand.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would for myself teach how to defend yourself high and low, because I don't really worry about low defense in the first many months. Not that it's not important; it's just not as important as stepping correctly.
Mostly defend low with footwork rather than blade work,
Mhm.
but
But the ability,
Also-
I think, like in my head, I teach most people there's 4 quadrants that people can attack.
yeah.
And then how to competently defend all 4 quadrants with both implements. And so in my case, I would be
Wonder-
teaching that with dagger and with sword.
Yeah. I agree with that, yeah.
Okay, but if we're talking intermediate here, right? I don't know what we're getting. I don't know what we would say when we get to advanced, but here I would a lot less focus on areas of and like actual like parries. I would say finding their blade is a bigger issue here, right? And blade tracking from your opponent and covering lines and that kind of thing. So when we would look at the basic and the beginner people here, all this stuff down there, it's very one sided. It's very build your own skills, right? As far as blade goes here, intermediate, I would say a lot of it has to take into account the opponent at this point.
I don't agree.
Okay.
Ooh, okay.
To me, in this range of fighting, there's still
Okay.
a lot of mechanical things that the person needs to improve upon for themselves.
Like what?
All things we've listed, these 4 squares that are here, the footwork, the mechanics, but the beginner things. I don't think in 6 months you have those beginner things down, that they are like second nature and refined. There's still a lot of
Okay.
Mm,
And
No,
so,
no, totally fair, totally fair. What are we talking about intermediate then? Let's define that real quick, just so I'm not talking over my head here.
6 months to 2 years
Yeah.
is what
6
I've got
months
it
to 2
listed at.
years. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
6
think
months to 2 years.
honestly, realistically, in high end sports, if you're putting in daily work, it'll take better part of a year to make an action second nature. If you're doing it casually, 2 years, pretty easy.
Yeah. So you want to say like perfecting basic mechanics?
Yeah, like trimming the fat, learning new mechanics.
Okay.
each quadrant.
Focusing on efficiency. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't think you should, like, as we get to advanced and expert, you're starting to look more and more outward to the individual you're fighting, the context in which
Okay.
you're fighting, the field awareness. All those things matter more.
Okay. Maybe I was thinking we're a little bit farther ahead then. Okay. My bad.
No. I just that for me is where like how I tend to think like inward first, the individual inward, and then outward as you get better and better, because the inward things become second nature, right? Like you don't have to think about your parries with your stick. You just do them. Like yeah, and no, you can't think about the parry because you are.
No. You don't need to think about the parry,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You can just say, oh, that needs to be covered, and just do it, whatever.
Yep. I would say taking like kind of basics, adding to them, and then turning them into second nature, right? Putting them into your lizard brain.
Oh,
think
funny
this is-
story. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think this is the time to start combining a lot of those basics, doing multiple, like second, third intention attacks, throwing in feints, stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yep. Disengages, starting to chain them together. That's the honestly.
We're in an ad break.
Oh. All right. While we're on that ad break, chat asks, do any of you currently have people you see at practice in the 6 months in range? Do y'all have folks that are 6 months or so in practice? I'm guessing 6 months or less is the question.
Man, I haven't had a consistent practice in 10 years.
When you showed up for practice
Yeah.
the other day, the answer would be yes.
Yes.
There are folks that would be in the beginner category that showed up.
There's some newer people in my practice. I don't always work with the newer people. Like they let some of the like intermediate people work with the newer people, but
Yeah, true.
That's its own
I always
question.
try to get the intermediate people to teach the basics.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that's smart.
in the step variant, Robert,
Yeah.
I think I would also add things like the same way you're talking about chaining blade actions together. I would start to chain individual actions, those above actions, as a chain together idea, right? Like if you
Yeah.
step back to create enough room while you parry, and then when you riposte, you need to step forward and then lunge if you are shorter than your opponent in terms of your length.
Yeah.
So I think I wanted to talk about this a little bit, like the difference between, and this is kind of Bumi's point about the difference between basics and intermediate and advanced stuff, is sometimes it is literally the same technique. It's just sort of how much critique on doing it correctly you're going to give the student, right? You know, it's like at a basic level, you're going to say that parry was mostly right. And then at an intermediate level, you're going to be like, well, he needs to be better. And then at an advanced level, like that needs to be perfect, right? Like that's kind of
Right.
some of it's going to be a lot of the same stuff. It's just to what level of perfection you're going to hold a student to.
100%.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. That's my
Um,
whole shtick on or
yeah.
spiel on
And
like
then
non-advanced things, right? These are just beginner things with less
Yeah.
fat on them.
yeah, so it's all about because like in some ways fencing isn't all that complicated, right? Like there's only so many actions that are successful, and footwork is mostly basic. It comes into like the complexity comes into like when you apply it and stuff like that. But
Yeah, it,
I
you know,
do the
it's
same. I do the same parries I did when I started. I just do them way better now.
Yep.
it's actually funny now that I think about it how reductive advanced fencers can be.
Hmm.
All
How
right,
do you
boom.
mean?
Like Boomy, when you and I were fighting
Mm-hmm.
on what was it, Thursday?
On Thursday, yeah.
Yeah, we didn't do anything super complex. It was
Nope.
pretty straightforward bang and bang, and it was
Mm-hmm.
pretty basic stuff, just
Yep.
at a high level.
There
Yeah.
were moments where like I think the nuance, like when we won't get to expert, we can talk about it, but you know,
Yep.
the nuances were like very moment to moment, fractions
Yeah.
of seconds, smallest setups, you know, the smallest like, hey, I swear I'm open here. Let me make it look real to you.
Hmm.
Those kind
I
of
feel like
interactions.
a big part of that, from my perspective as someone who has very recently gotten to those top advanced expert tiers,
Sure.
the thing that I see as causing that is the efficiency that's required. As you get better and better, you can't do the bullshit that's slow. You have to do the most efficient thing, because if you don't, someone's just going to be more
They
efficient than
punish
you.
you. Yep.
Well, your margin of when I'm fighting John or Boomy, my margin of error is minuscule.
Yeah, absolutely.
As opposed to like sometimes I'll fight someone and be like, "Oh, I missed that," and then laugh about it in the fight. You know,
Hmm.
Yep. You have time to do it. Yeah.
yeah, time to do it. Yeah.
Question before we move on from intermediate blade mechanics. Do we want to put things like feints and invitations in here?
I would introduce them. I wouldn't necessarily make them practice or learn them hardcore here. Honestly, 6 months to 2 years, no. I would say here you can try it. But I would at this point I'm just having them pay attention to what their opponent does, right? Like if you do this, watch what your opponent flinches, right? Then you can do your lunge maybe
Mm,
or something. But I wouldn't be teaching it as a that. But you guys may do it differently.
Do we think that a feint is a blade mechanic thing?
I was gonna say that to me
ooh,
falls a little bit more like it's like a invitation is sort of blade mechanics, but also sort of strategy.
yeah,
But it kind of depends on how you. There's so many ways to do a feint or an invitation, right? You can
Correct.
do it
right.
by
Hundred
moving your blade,
percent.
but you could do it. A lot of the ones I do are by pauses, right? Like little stutter
Yeah,
movements.
I swear my
Draw
leg
them.
is open. Go ahead.
Mhm.
Oh no, my dagger's out of place. Take my wrist. Go
Let's
ahead.
Yeah.
yeah, let's put that in strategies and tactics then. Your just
You know,
invitations generally.
do you know how many people try to hit my sword hand? My stick hand, I mean.
Right. Like your stick hand is uh
Not worth it.
most of the time a trap, but
Oh, it's moving 100% of the time. It's always moving.
I think
Yeah.
your stick hand has to be set up like anything else. Like we have to be fighting, and you have to be. Your brain has to be in your like. Oh, he might throw at my foot. Oh no, I defended my foot well. Oh no, my hand is out of position and got
This is.
picked. Like that.
I
That
think
has
this
to
is.
be the sequence.
To me, this is probably getting a little too specific, but to me, Dom's stick hand is not worth the amount of concentration I would need to
To
put
hit
to
it,
hit
yeah.
it, right? Because if I'm putting that much focus on trying to hit it, then he's just gonna kill me
Mm-hmm.
while I'm doing that.
Other things better,
Right.
unless it
That
becomes
was
free.
just a side note because like my stick hand is moving constantly,
Yep.
right? Like
It's a
if you
bait.
throw at it, I'm definitely going to be pairing your shot with my stick hand, right? It's like that's the easiest thing I can do.
Right.
It's a
But
bait.
it's-
Almost everyone else that I've ever fought who fights with stick, I will take their stick hand.
Mhm.
It's a very
That's so
specific.
exposed, usually.
Yeah,
I can't think of it. I'm trying to think if I've done that or not.
it's not like
Well,
there's that many.
now I'm going to go do it.
For measure and tempo, I would start to
Oh, here we go.
I would start to introduce the more complex motions that pairs. It would Venn diagram with footwork, which we can't do in this particular chart.
Yeah.
But it would Venn diagram with footwork, like the idea that you can be dynamic in your footwork to close that measure to the measure that you want, or deny other people the measure that they want. Right. I tend to
And
teach.
That varying step size you were talking about?
Oh, absolutely. I like a lot of people delve into the blade mechanics of what if you seed something. My general counter to that is if you're keeping the measure that you want, seeding around somebody else's blade is you can just nullify that concept entirely. Like it will always be a straight line attack, assuming you keep the measure appropriately with good footwork.
Okay. So in that, I would probably put in on the border here. If this 2 month to or 6 month to 2 year person has good balance, I would also throw in oblique attacks here.
Can you
With
elaborate
offhand.
on oblique attacks in your mind?
So oblique attack, the oblique step to the right, throwing back to the left.
Okay.
Increasing the angle there to get around a dagger or an offhand.
How does that differ in a disengage? Is it on the footwork side, like the big body positioning?
A little bit. Okay, so, and this may just be a me thing, and this may be more an advanced thing, but I see openings in my opponent from an oblique sides, from right and left. And part of what I do is I say, all right, if I can get over to that angle, I can hit them because they're focused straight forward, right? So I would start here, intermediate. I would say, all right, we're going to start throwing not just only straight line attacks, moving off to the side a little bit, and then wrapping a disengage around a dagger. But that could be more advanced thing. I have taught it several times, but I hadn't never to like a consistent student.
I think that's very reasonable to teach in this, like introduce the
I
concepts.
agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna put it in footwork for us.
Oh, that is a good idea, Bumi. I will be right back.
Chat. I'm preparing for our wizard staff day at Benzik.
You're training.
I'm training. I'm truly training.
Bumi, I got distracted when you were just talking about that intermediate measure and timing stuff. Could you repeat what you had mentioned?
To elaborate, to me, the thing that you teach next is varying your measure and your tempo, being dynamic with it to create the or deny the measure that you want. Right, you're taking that good footwork and you're saying, Robert is very dangerous in if they can get blade-to-blade contact, so I need to stay just outside of their ability to take their blade and touch mine. However, they're a lot less dangerous if I get the first step toward them and present a threat, and they have to respond to it. And if I know that, then I can implement that concept. But I would teach it from the mechanic side, not the specific person side.
And this is where things like changing the speed that you're moving your weapon comes in, where you can catch people off guard with that.
Yep. And the feet, right?
Yeah.
You know how like you can step back and then step forward, or you can step back, load your back foot with a bunch of weight ready to spring forward? I think that sort of stuff becomes a cross of footwork plus measure control.
I'm gonna have to reorganize all of this. Everything plays into different categories.
Oh yeah.
One drill for measure that I like to teach. This is probably an intermediate thing. Is that I will have someone stand in front of me, and I will lunge at them, and they will just have to step back to avoid my attack without parrying or anything. And the goal of the drill is for them to not get hit, but also if they step too far back, then they also lose. So they have to like step just out of range.
That's so good. I love that one.
An inch or two. So that they learn to judge someone else's measure. And we'll just do it over and over again and get a feel. And usually it actually doesn't take very long for someone to get a feel where they can start timing your lunge and figuring out how far they need to step to get it right.
Yep.
It actually, and I would consider that it's a like end of beginner, start of intermediate drill.
I think that becomes more intermediate to advanced when you add in a double step or a cross step back. Like, oh shit, they got me.
You can kind of make it harder or easier depending on the level of the student, right? Depending.
or replace
And
them.
Okay.
you can
Okay,
also
Emma,
have
do you see
you
anything
can
cool while I was gone?
you can also have people rotate. Like if you have a practice, you can have everyone do it with everyone because it's also like someone will start to learn my range, right? But they might not learn Bob's range or Phil's range or whatever, right? You have to like learn.
Learn how to recognize range.
Yeah. So that's a good one. That's a specific drill, and specifically, I'll credit. I learned that one from Duke Miguel.
Nice.
John, would a succinct way to say that be that the like assistant lunges and then the person being trained backsteps as little as they need to avoid getting hit?
Yes, that'd be a good way of putting it.
Cool. Yeah, I
Question
like that.
on the offhands. Are we making a distinction here between using your offhand and attacking someone else's offhand?
I hadn't thought about it.
I
So, like-
honestly would not. I think that falls under strategies and tactics for
Yeah.
other people, and then for yourself, it's blade mechanics.
Yeah.
Blade or item mechanics, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would. I mean, I consider like when I teach people dagger parries, I consider that blade mechanics. Like it's a blade, and
Mhm.
we're teaching. It's the same mechanics as the sword. You're just doing it with the dagger.
Yep.
So
Yeah, maybe a more general column name would be like arm mechanics.
yeah.
Arm mechanics.
Yeah.
Upper body. Are we just like upper body, lower body?
But yeah, honestly, upper body, lower body.
Yeah, that's really more accurate.
Sure, yeah.
It actually
That's
really
not
is.
wrong. We call it blade mechanics, but it is ultimately,
Yeah.
both your body plus the blade.
Yeah, so I think we're going to get blending them a lot more as we get advanced and expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna. What'd you say, John?
So they'll get the lines will get blurred a lot more as we get advanced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
An expert.
absolutely.
So I would also teach someone like, or at least address, all right, someone's got how to get it around a dagger parry, or if your homeboy opponent has a buckler he uses a lot, what would you do to that, right? At this point, you're okay to start at least addressing that and talking with them how to do it, right?
Yep. I would definitely start to discuss
Yeah.
kind of basic strategies. Honestly, I like to use examples of what I would assert is poor footwork or poor blade mechanics in a given instance as a demonstration, as a somebody watching. Like I'll be sitting on sidelines. I did it today. Just sitting on sidelines with somebody else. Be like, hey, you see how they lean back when they get spooked? That freezes your feet because your weight goes high and off center, and then you're susceptible to the follow-up attack because you can't move your feet well.
I love doing that at events with like when people around me start watching the fights, and some people have never even like thought about it, right, or watching it, and then you say, hey, here's what happened, and they're like, oh yeah, it's like light bulb go on, right?
I think coaching it's like, if you want to be a little bit more nuanced, coaching is a separate thing than teaching, and I think like that falls under coaching.
Oh yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah. I would say that I'm way more of a coach than a teacher.
Cool. Do we have anything to add to strategies and tactics and or?
What do we have in there? It's very small.
We have invitations and feints. Let me bump that one up.
Okay, I got you. Invitations, feints.
You had just talked about like offhand tactics, Dom.
Yeah, countering offense.
Yeah, I like that.
Yep.
I think I want to put in like tall versus short, overcoming differences like that.
Oh yeah, overcoming physical differences, sure.
Addressing different implements falls under intermediate. They should be exposed to that at this point.
Addressing different implements. You mean like different offhands?
Mm-hmm. Or swords.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah.
Right? Different
like
lengths, different
variants.
presence, different grips that other people choose to use. That sort of like.
Yeah.
That's all very reasonable.
Side note: Costco sangria is delicious.
Hell yeah.
Good to know.
One other relevant point under strategies and tactics in the function of the SCA is talking about some of the variation in tournaments.
Oh yeah.
Like I think.
Oh, true.
I think by the time you're at 2 years, you're competing. Probably, you're wanting to be better. You're testing yourself, and you should be taught kind of, what's the difference? How do you approach a Bedford points versus a single limb versus a triple limb progressive weapons, etc.
Fair
What is
pitch.
context?
100%. Because about this time, you're learning to be an SCA fighter, not just learn how to do a sword, right?
Ideally,
So
you've been off. You've gone to wars. You've fought some melees.
right.
etc.
Right. So you should be learning how to approach different tournaments and events, right? Because that's part of what advances you as an SCA fighter
Absolutely.
in rank is how you, I guess, huge part of it is how you comport yourself at an event.
Correct. Yep.
Mhm. I think another part along those lines is tournament mindset, is understanding how to get yourself to perform.
The mental. Yep.
Yep.
Oh,
That-
we've done a whole podcast on that.
Find your flow states.
Yeah. I like that. Finding flow state.
Okay, so I practice that too. I would put that in practice as well.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I thought that one over.
Because I got super. I mean, you've all heard me tell this story before. At least Boomy and John have. I used to get super frustrated when my performance would fluctuate between tournaments, right? And I would be like, "What did I have for breakfast? Did I sleep enough last night? What was the difference?"
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating that finally I just started practicing at practice. Like, all right, now is tournament, and I would go out and pretend like I was fighting a tournament,
Mhm.
and that's the only way I got through it. Actually doing it, practicing it. So I don't know. It's probably not in 2 years at this point, but
That and going to as many tournaments as you can afford to or are able to is also.
true. There were a lot more tournaments back then.
Yeah.
I went to like for a period of like 3 years. I went to like 2 or 3 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Money and time always factor into that. Right? How hard do
sure.
you hobby?
Well, there was also a rule that went into place that you couldn't have an event within a certain distance of another event happening.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah has
And that was a while ago that went into effect, and so there used to be like 2 tournaments in one, or like 2 events in one area, and one would have a tournament, and the other one wouldn't.
Mm. Wait, is that a society-wide rule?
No, it's just Atlanta.
There's a
It's a
kingdom rule.
kingdom,
Monster
yeah.
has a similar rule though.
It might be multiple kingdoms, but I know our kingdom
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
a like 50 or 100-mile rule.
Something
well,
like that. Yeah.
It's
I don't know what it
kingdom
is,
by
but-
kingdom by kingdom. I don't
Yeah.
think it's a
Yeah,
society
correct.
rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Texas is probably like 200 miles.
Yeah. Texas is far.
I think it's
Is big.
100 miles, but I don't remember.
Right, because I mean, the people in Oklahoma could probably just have their own tournament every week, and I think it wouldn't bother you guys at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends. It's only that this is very specific. It only is about 3 hours from Dallas to Oklahoma City, so it's not really that far.
That's true.
Chat, and if you're just joining us, we are looking at the breakdown of some of these columns of footwork, blade mechanics, measure timing, and tactics and training methods as you advance, as you kind of go through the progression of beginner to expert. I think we're on advanced now. Is that correct?
I think
Just
we're
about-
just filling out strategies and tactics for.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have things to add to intermediate?
I feel like there should be more in measure and timing.
I feel like that too. But I do, before we get to that, I want to ask you all about invitations and feints, because I feel like that's a big category that we don't have any notes on.
Sure.
So like what sort of things do you try to focus on when you're teaching this?
Add.
I wouldn't
Um,
teach. I wouldn't teach much to an intermediate at this point.
Yeah.
The 2 years. 2 years. I wouldn't. 2 years. There's still.
Yeah. It would
Do you think
be
we should bump that
they
down? Yeah.
exist, and here's a very
mean,
blatantly
they
obvious
exist.
one.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
about it.
So like, in general, in strategy and tactics, even for the most part, like, if you just have good mechanics, and I mean like footwork, blade work, right, parries, all that kind of stuff, if you just work on those, you be able to beat most people. You
Yeah.
don't really need to use strategy and tactics until you're actually like advanced. I kind of think
Yeah.
like I don't
Correct.
use
Sure.
tactics or strategy to beat 80% of people. You know,
Mhm.
like it's just beating them because I'm just like I can just parry better than them and lunge
Yeah.
better.
Mhm.
Yeah. If I like a disengage is kind of disengage, right? Like it's not.
Yup.
So like
it's not.
yeah.
Yeah. If someone's an intermediate, they're still gonna get disengaged. You know, it's gonna.
So yeah,
It's gonna happen.
like if I'm fighting Boomy, then I'm gonna use some strategy and tactics.
Mhm.
That's also playing on the whatever years of history we have with
Having
each other
book,
too.
Yeah,
Right?
having book
So,
gets into expert mode, I think.
like last time I
Yeah.
fought him, I did this, and he
Mhm.
knows that I did that last time, and we both know.
Yeah.
Like, what is he gonna do, right? You know, it's like, but I don't know that that's ever really like. I just don't. I don't know that that's stuff you should worry about until way later.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think we probably covered that way more under like dealing with tall people or short people or fast people or
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. I think it's more straightforward at this point for the fighter.
Agreed.
All right, are we good to move on to advanced then?
Yep.
Yeah, let's do it.
I would say 2 years to, if we're going SCA,
6.
Yeah.
6, maybe even to like
So
high GOA,
I
low mod, like is what
I
I
feel like
picture in my head.
expert. Yeah.
I didn't realize there was an expert above advanced. I forgot about that. I've not been paying attention.
To me, advanced is like low mod.
Okay. Yeah.
From
So I think,
intermediate to low mod.
in my opinion, if you are very, very dedicated and you train a lot, you should be able to get to mod level in about 4 years, 4, 5, 6 years between
4, 5.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Absolutely.
4 years.
You mean just in prowess?
Just in prowess, obviously. Not.
Yeah.
I'm not of the.
Yes.
Um. I actually think the same thing
4
for
years.
Shiv too. Yeah,
I agree.
Alright.
I agree very much.
4 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's counting like 2 practices a week. You know,
Events, yeah.
an event every other week or something.
And you
You know,
have a
like you're going
coach
to
or
2
somebody
events.
who can lead you through
Yeah,
it.
and you have training. Like that's proper, dedicated, way above
Mhm.
average person.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Yeah.
do that for 4 years, that's
Okay.
into
Yep.
the realm of tier
By
level
prowess.
fighter.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
John, I would agree with you that 4 years is probably best case scenario. What do you
Mhm.
think is kind of a like generic someone who's trying
So
hard?
you mean like average
Someone who's
or like
not.
median?
Yeah, well, like what's an average for someone who's consistently training but isn't physically gifted, doesn't have a background in sports,
I
whatever.
still think if you're reasonably dedicated, I still think it's about 4 years, but maybe it
Okay.
would be closer to 5 or 6.
I would
Okay.
say closer to 5 or 6, right?
Yeah, that 4, 5, 6 years I think is the
I
sweet
think
spot.
6 to 8 for a person who has to climb a little bit harder because the first couple of years are dedicated to changing around some lifestyle things to be able to have the physical
Yeah.
ability
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
Totally.
So there's a lot of wide variability.
Yeah,
in here
there's
that we're
it
talking
depends on the
Absolutely.
human, absolutely. But
Right, we're talking about geographical variability. We're talking about mentorship availability.
mhm.
Mm,
And
money,
we're
talking
time,
about-
etc.
there's a lot of yeah.
yeah, I also don't know that putting time on any of this is actually all that useful for a trainer anyway. Like to just say,
Okay.
when,
Okay. Yeah.
like, I think we're making some assumptions and averages out of based on our lived experience with
Yes.
watching people, but I
Totally.
don't know that it would be useful to tell a new person who's like, well, once you've been fighting for this long, then you can learn. Like, it's
Correct.
going to be
Sure.
so dependent on the person
100%.
that I don't know that putting timelines on things like this is
Yeah.
actually helpful.
And sometimes it's not
okay.
even the person; it's like the social group, right? Like they're because it's
Sure.
you're given the thing. It's not a
Yeah,
it's not
I-
a
So-
you earned it by merit.
John, if
Counter-
not timeline, what criteria would you use to break out different levels? Because I think saying it's all ambiguous is also helpful.
no, and that's a good question. I don't know that I have a super good answer on that.
Okay.
It would be somehow you would have to like be assessing how you feel like they're executing certain techniques or
Yeah, sure.
how their overall fight
Right,
is
or knowledge or whatever. Yeah.
their knowledge of fight
Do
or
you-
maybe however how their performance is across like
Yeah.
if you're judging across different tournaments over like assuming
Mhm.
they're consistently competing like what kind of fighters are they beating like how consistently and
Teaching,
how far are they going in the
PLQ.
tournament?
So John, my counterpoint to that is if I have a student, right, and I can look at these criteria that we've laid out here, and whatever we put in advanced, right, I can say, all right, maybe not in so many words, but say in a couple more years, I want you to be at this level or be doing these things or be better at these things or be doing these kind of things, right? So maybe for advanced, we switch from what am I teaching this person to do to what should this person be able to do or be learning and doing.
Mhm.
That's
Sure.
reasonable.
Make sense?
And before we jump into it, let's get clear on our difference between expert and advanced, because I think there's going to be a lot of overlap. So
All right.
to me, expert is like the people who are like literally John, you, Boomy, all y'all, who are consistently first place in big interkingdom tournaments. Do y'all
That
agree with
is,
that?
that's not really a good dynamic because I just spent 3 years in Lockhack, and there's a wide variability of the people who would be in the top level in different areas, different kingdoms.
Okay, sure.
But could you make an argument? I mean, this is a little too spicy for the stream, but like, is there an expert level fighter in Lokak?
So,
Like some kingdoms might not have anyone of a certain.
so here's what I had to tell them, right? Like when I was at my peak, right, there was still an elite level, right? And at this point, I would consider Boomy and John to be on that elite level. Most of the expert tigers would be on that level as well, right? But below that, right, just and that is a small fraction of people, right? That is not many people are in that elite level. Okay, below that level, there's a wide variability and a lot of people who could be considered experts and are very damn good fighters,
Mm-hmm.
right? And would be in the top of their kingdom tournaments, and no one would be surprised, right? But there's also that other elite level layer on top of it that I can recognize in the fighting when I'm fighting someone, right? And that's what I had to describe to people down and how to put that sort of diplomatically down in Lokak is like there's very few people in that elite level in Lokak, but on that second like tier that I would still consider expert and still consider like if I win a tournament with them in it, I still count it as a feather in my hat,
Sure.
So
and-
top
and-
8 kingdom. That's
So
easy.
top 8 kingdom.
That's a fairly
but-
easy.
That's expert.
Yeah. Let's do top
I
8
like that.
kingdom.
It honestly doesn't really matter too much how we define it, so much as we agree on it, so we can talk about it.
Yeah. Top 8 kingdom, but we don't have to consider them top 10 in the world. How about that?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm good with that for the most part.
All right, let's get into advanced.
Now let's name
advanced footwork.
names. Let's talk about who's there.
That's a
Let's.
whole different stream.
It's a different stream.
This one's getting controversial enough. Let's save that one for another night.
We did that stream already. And people got mad.
People got pissed.
Yep.
I still love it. I do it again personally. But,
Oh, we don't want to hijack Robert's thing.
yes. No,
Throw him
I'm not
under the
saying
bus.
tonight. I'm saying another night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's do advanced. Not
Advanced.
expert. So not just above intermediate, but not the best in their kingdom. Oh, we're on an ad break.
If those who are still listening, if you want to drop a Bezos bucks with your Amazon Prime, you can do so and
Wait,
avoid
did
those
I do
ad
that?
breaks.
Did I do that this month?
I don't know, but if you pay for Prime and you don't have if you haven't dropped it on anybody,
Hold on, I don't know.
yeah,
Where's the button?
Wouldn't all the people who can hear what you're saying have done it? So
that's true. That's exactly it. That is true. That is true. Let me know when the ad break's done. I don't know how that works. The ad break thing works. I'm still
Use
working on it.
Prime sub.
Hell yeah.
There we go. Share
I
1
don't-
month
I don't-
free. All right, cool.
Oh, there it is.
It's your 2-month sub anniversary.
Also, there's
Hell
ad
yeah.
blockers.
I
you
love
guys
it.
Just saying.
I appreciate any
This
and
is
all
hilarious.
Bezos bucks. That way you get to skip those ads and
And you can put the emotes in
yeah,
there.
you can emote fancily.
Yeah, sure. Go.
Okay, so Robert is currently AFK for a second. Shall we talk? What do you two think would be additions to footwork for advance? Like, what do you think of as if you were teaching somebody who was an advanced student?
No. We're not. Are we still teaching people, or are we just expecting them to do it?
I think that
I do
there's
teaching.
so if someone, I think there is advanced level teaching, right?
Mhm, absolutely.
Like if there's especially if there's a level above advanced, then
Okay, that's fair.
I think there's always teaching. If you can find the best person
Yeah.
that exists currently, you can learn from
Yeah.
them, right? That's
so and another argument, and I think the SCA actually has an issue with this. professional athletes, like the best athletes in the world, have coaches who still work with them.
Oh
and
yeah,
train
yeah.
them.
Yup.
So we kind of have this assumption in the SCA a lot of times where like the best fighters don't need to be taught or need like help with their fighting because of how good they are. But it's like, well, but they're still you can't see what you're doing, right? You know.
Correct.
But
Now,
at the same time though, the coaches get paid a hell of a lot less more than the athletes, and the athletes have the responsibility to go to the coaches and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
help me with the curveball or whatever."
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think there are way fewer people like a person that could coach or teach Boomy or I or you, Dom. There's not
Mhm.
that many people in the SE that can do that, right? Versus there's
Right.
a lot of people who could teach some of the basics or even the intermediate stuff, right?
I
Mhm.
mean, so honestly, like one thing I would say about an advanced fighter, is like if they recognize something that they want to learn, they can teach themselves. They can figure out how to
Yeah.
learn it.
Yes,
I-
that's actually really
Yeah.
good. I would put that maybe
Self-guided.
under strategy and tactics, or like the last
Like
category
training.
of like practicum
Yeah, would you say that's like self-guided
training. Yeah,
learning?
self-guided. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, if
Definitely
you want
should
to
be
talk
that.
about that, yeah.
The capacity to understand how to troubleshoot your own game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point. Catching your mistakes.
Very good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
Maybe even in the middle of a fight and being able to correct them
Yes.
on the
Oh,
fly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
For sure.
really, realistically, it should be that.
Yeah.
So the story, I actually figured this out. I was sort of probably on the cusp of intermediate to advanced, and I was talking with Adon. Have you guys had much time to interact with Adon?
Not I.
Decent.
I see him on
He's-
Tuesdays at practice.
Oh, yeah, he comes to Tuesday practice.
To armor practice, yeah. He's Baron currently.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
nice. He comes here to the battle barn.
No, armor practice. I go down
Okay.
to armor practice on Tuesdays. People come to here. I go down south to Khmer.
Gotcha. Okay. But I remember asking him. I was like thinking about this tactic, and I was thinking about like, all right, you do this thing, and you do. I don't even remember what the tactic was. It doesn't matter at this point. Like, what if your opponent does this, and then you do this, and then what if he does this? And I asked him this question, and he just kind of went, yeah, whatever. And at that moment, I realized you have to figure it out for yourself in the moment, or before or after the moment. Figure it out for yourself and figure out how to adjust and make that fight, do that move, or counter that strategy for yourself. What is your reaction to that? And learn how to do that for yourself and teach yourself how to do that. And that was just like eye-opening to me. He just kind of went, yeah, you just do whatever, just parry it,
Figuring it out.
Yeah, so he's like, there's no like button combination answer for it, right?
That's
It's
true.
you got to go figure it out and do it.
The answer is almost
Yeah.
always it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's one thing Duke Lachlan talks about. He does not like combos, which especially in heavy fighting combos are talked about a lot. He's like,
Yeah.
don't do a combo. You do individual shots in rapid succession.
Well, yeah, you should be able to stop in the middle of your combo and do a different one if there's an opening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make the adjustments. Yep. I would honestly, for both, really, for all three categories, the first three categories, I think by the time you are advanced, you should be trimming the last little bit of fat off of the actions. Whatever action set you have.
Agreed.
And then other than that, maybe make changes in your actions based on if someone just stomps you, why? The question becomes why? Is the thing wrong, or are you just not as good as they are in doing the action? And asking those questions.
I would
So
say
good.
I would say at this point, in some ways, a lot of your what your stuff should be doing should just be on autopilot, right? Like
Exactly.
your parries, your lunges, your posts, and you should be refining them down to like making sure they're perfect.
Yes.
And then it becomes way more like I was saying earlier. This is really where strategy and tactics become like almost the main part of fencing, because I don't know that there's that much difference between an advanced and an expert level fighter as far as their like the way they're moving their sword around. Like it's going to be mostly the same.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more do you know all the ways to beat all the other top fighters?
Yes.
I feel like
And consistency. And consistency is the other thing. Like
sorry. John, I agree with you for the most part. I want to add, though, specifically for blade mechanics, I think something that tends to come with with this kind of advanced range that we've got here, is the ability to break outside of the kind of normal bounds of
So
like normal
here's what I was
parries.
thinking, right? You got to have. I think we're talking about more of an attribute now than we are a tactic or technique, right? Because what we're talking about is adaptability, right? We have
Mhm.
all these techniques that we've learned, we've mastered, and trimmed the fat off of, but we have to be able to adapt them inside of a fight, right? Because no two fights are the same, right? None. Right. So when I think of an advanced fighter, I think of adaptability. Like, oh, so he threw something unexpected, or he did something unexpected in the middle of a fight that broke the other person's rhythm, or defeated that, made that one fight a victory where it could have gone either way.
Both those are really good points.
Mhm.
I agree with that.
This last Gulf War, I
Mhm.
fought in. Ultimately, I fought John in the finals. But my journey to the finals were one string of mods. It's just mod after mod after mod after mod after mod.
Mhm.
Until I fought
Oh
John
my gosh, the queen, the rose tourney,
in a roast tournament. And so, for context, that was like 200 some people, 200 plus.
Wow,
It's a
massive.
fuck ton of
that's
people.
humongous.
It was a
Um,
big tournament, yes.
And I say this not like it's not intended to be a flex. It is a I got to experience what variations in advanced all the way through expert feels like in front of me over the course of the day, right? Like 7 or 8
Yeah.
matches.
Mhm.
And
What was that like?
one of the things that's very consistent is that I do think the people who came out ahead, everybody had their fundamental movements down really well to different degrees of perfection or like trimmed. But
Mhm.
I think the difference really boiled down to this blue category of strategy, right? I think the reason I am able to come out ahead a lot of times is I am as consistent as the next person. And I'm not special in that way, but I'm more able to make an adjustment on the fly and more readily identify their weaknesses or habits. And I think one of the things that takes an
Yeah.
advanced person into expert is their ability to be dynamic. If I had to like just one trait, which means in every way, your gait, your parries, your responses, all of them should
Adaptability.
be as unpredictable as possible. And that's the difference between an advanced fighter who is very tight but does the exact same parry as a response every time versus
You know what? That is something that's bugged me a lot of times, and every time someone says I need the muscle memory for something,
mm-hmm.
it bugs me every time because you if you automatically do the same thing every time, like the same exact movement, the same thing, it's easy to counter,
someone else
right?
can abuse it. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no. If someone does an awesome parry every time, I'm still going to counter it, right? Like if he does
Mm-hmm.
it the same
Doesn't matter
way
how
every
good it
time,
is. Yep.
it doesn't
I agree.
matter how good it is.
Yep. That's I think is the difference between if I had to draw one characteristic that's different between these two rows, it is the ability to be more dynamic and
Yeah.
adaptable.
Ability.
Mm-hmm.
We all
Right.
fought those fighters that are like, they're pretty good. Maybe they're even upper intermediate, maybe even advanced, but they're
Mhm.
very like you can tell what like a lot of times it's people who've done a lot of training with like a period manual or something. They're very like when you do this, they respond.
Yeah.
Like
If
if you
then,
give
Mhm.
them
if
A,
then.
they respond with B,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so it's like once you kind of figure that out, you're like, oh, I push this button and I get this response out,
Yep.
and
Oh
then you
yeah.
just you have a great time with those people. You're just it's so
John,
easy
I
to
feel
kill
like
them.
I see that often with what people around here call one-trick ponies, where someone has a game that works,
Mm-hmm.
but once you figure it out, they crumble.
There's
OTPs.
a lot of
Yeah.
people. There's a lot of people who are I fight tall, right? And that's their one trick.
Mm-hmm.
But John, you're right. Like, and I can say this because I've already gotten my cookie or whatever. When people say they study um, a period manual or they fight a certain period style, I 100% know that I'm just going to walk over them because they have no adaptability, no dynamic movement in their system. Right now, technically, they can say no. My system handles everything, and for everything there's a response, and everything you can do, and it's never true, right? In theory, yes. In practice, no. It's
And
just not.
I really agree with you, Don, but I think that it's not, and I really don't blame the period manuals. I blame the way people approach. The people who are drawn to period manuals tend to be want They want to learn by the book, like literally.
Yeah,
And so
easy
they have
answers
not.
for complex situations
Yes,
that fly by.
and
They don't
it
want to
does,
learn. They don't want to learn to be adaptable. They want to learn the answer, what button to push when someone
Yeah,
does
if
X,
then, if
Y, or
then.
Z.
Hmm.
Yeah.
and they become. Some of them never even get to the level we're talking about. But if they can get decent, then they're still very predictable and they're very programmable. You're
Mhm.
like, I push back, I do this, and you're gonna do this back, and so I can just kill you every time because you can't even help yourself from throwing the shot that I want you to throw.
Right. Yeah. It's just like you're going to do it regardless, and I'm just going to do something else.
Yeah,
Um.
it's pretty great to fight those people.
No, and it frustrates me because like I can't tell them, hey, this thing that you spent, so many hours trying to perfect is what's getting you dead, right? Because I mean, how do you have that conversation with them without
Well,
being a jerk?
it's kind of the practice makes permanent in a sense we were talking about earlier,
Yeah,
right?
true, sure.
We have a question from chat. One thing that I have heard is that manuals were made as a way to bring people into master schools. They don't show everything. Do y'all agree?
I don't know enough about the history to know for sure, but that would be based on having looked at the manuals, that would seem to be true.
I also think that like manuals themselves describe a lot of things way better than the pictures show because the pictures are sort of a frozen point in time.
Right, the text of the
Um,
context of the picture.
Right, and a lot of the things that I've read in manuals, I can be like, oh, yeah, I've done that. I recognize this when I do this in X and Y and Z. That opening is there when X, Y happens.
Yeah.
And so I think like you said, it's the approach, right? Um, I don't know if it was an ad for the school. I don't know for sure, but it would. I mean, it's working however many hundreds of years later.
Robert, could I request a box between these two categories? The
Yeah, absolutely.
advanced and the expert.
In strategies and
And
tactics.
strategies and tactics, please.
Yeah, I got you.
What are we doing?
Right here is where
Is this book?
do what?
Is this book?
Oh, honestly, that's also a good thing to have. That does work well there. I was going to put there's a variability of how much one can adapt in the speed of it adaptation, and I think that's something that goes. It's not just adaptability, but it's like the speed at which you adapt in the middle of a fight is actually what determines the outcome more so than your ability to adapt. If that makes
Like
sense.
real-time response to your opponent.
Real-time response, yeah. I actually think that's what takes some people into expert. Like that's a skill that takes you through advanced, through expert. How fast? Because there's some people like, honestly, that's one of the things that I think of when I think of like a Tora or a Torse caliber fighter. They are very fucking good at nothing hits them twice the same way. They have already read and programmed what they're going to deal with when you've done something good and touched them with a blade.
Yeah, I mean that's something I feel like you and I have talked about that has bumped up my fighting level is being able to adapt in real time.
Good.
Okay, I would say, but before that, right? And this is just a point of order, right? You can't do that unless you have built all these building blocks underneath, right?
Yeah.
Like you understand, you can recognize feints and invitations, right? You know the tournament styles. You have the blade mechanics down to where you can adapt and know what the blade is going to do while you're doing it. That's one of the reasons that I focus on tactile feel of the blade in the very beginning.
That's a good tactile response versus visual response. I would put it under blade mechanics as probably a beginner thing that runs all the way throughout.
Yeah. Because you can feel something way quicker than you're going to see it. Honestly,
absolutely. Yeah.
That's why fencing is such a bullshit spectator sport.
That's something I've been noticing recently. I try to watch people fencing to like analyze them, but it's so fast.
Yeah. It's a very literal blur.
Yeah.
You can get better at watching it, but you almost have to practice that as its own skill.
Yeah.
I've gotten better at
skill.
watching it. That is something that I've gotten better at over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years.
Yeah. And I know some like non-fighters who have gotten better at watching it too. Like they don't fight, but they've watched it so much.
I think that falls under coaching, right? Like that's a similar category.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. I usually do watch a lot of people because I'll like look at someone, say, hey, they are really relying on their deep lunge today, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Training methodologies for advanced and expert should be video review frame by frame.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If that is not
Yeah.
obvious to folks who are in this chat, we do this a lot for ourselves and on stream and for others.
You think that that's a technique that's terribly useful for beginner and
Advanced.
intermediate?
I think that's probably gateway. Yeah.
I think it's okay, but I don't think it has as much value or return on investment.
And that's probably because you don't have the kind
fact
of self-guided learning. You don't have the ability to troubleshoot your own game.
The fact that you have to trim off is very apparent when you're intermediate or beginner. It's not subtle. Whereas like the fact that I need to trim off to beat John in a particular action is very subtle, and it can be like half a frame long.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that's the difference between me hitting him and not.
And video review to the point of the going back to the manuals, right? If you were to stop the video review in any sort of, we do this all the time, right? We stop it frame by frame, and it looks like, oh man, this is the worst position you've ever been in. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you here?
Yeah.
You can make any fighter of any level look like an idiot if you find the right.
Yeah, the right freeze frame.
You're like, oh, look at this person, they're horrible because they're in.
No, I used to back when we had the digital cameras not on our phones, right? I had a whole album of how not to fence, and it was all pictures of me in like ridiculous poses, taken in between fights.
We probably all had pictures show up on
100%.
social media of us. There's some photographer at an event, and they like,
Yeah.
Why do they like? I'm pretty sure I looked cool right before this and right after this, but they spent a lot of time where
Yeah, the photographer gets the worst moment.
Yeah.
Why was I doing that? Oh my god, was I parrying someone behind me? What's going on?
One more I'd like to add to strategy and tactics that's really both. Since our conversation has moved into both advanced and expert at this point.
The
line's pretty blurred. Is some people call it casting energy. To me, it is like a call and response. But the idea is that if I quick twitch my shoulders and get low and move around, I can get my opponent to mimic the energy that I'm giving, the aura, the whatever however you want to phrase it. But if I relax my shoulders and relax my body, they mimic that, and that might be the time I snap an attack through. I did that. That's another thing I did literally today, and I have done in the past. I think that's how, like I popped Miles at the Onstein tournament a year and a half ago, and that was what I did to get. Like I just saw, like he relaxed, I relaxed, and I threw.
I mean, would you consider that separate from the idea of programming your opponent, like getting them to do a certain thing, like John was talking about earlier?
I think there's overlap, but I also think it's different.
It's more
because you
like vibes.
You can fall if you had to separate it in verbally. There's overlap. There's a Venn diagram there, but there's also a category of essentially deceit. How do I lie to my opponent to get the information I want? Right, I can probe for information by being twitchy and seeing how fast they react. What are their automatic reactions?
Yeah, but I would do that before I was an expert though.
Yeah, I've added a line for the ability to safely gather info in a fight.
I think that is absolutely, definitely advanced expert generally. I think intermediate folks just do that already. Like, right, their brains are already processing and looking for paths to victory. But I think that it is more important to focus on those things at this point in your journey.
Yeah, I don't know how to say it right, but like manipulating your opponent.
Yeah.
And doing the same kind of thing, projecting energy, or in my case, it would be putting them in a corner if I want them to not back up anymore, or stuff like that. Right?
Ringcraft is another good category to put into really advanced and expert both.
Yeah.
My progression with, and I think I've told both John and Dom this before, but for you, chat, I fought Dom like tournament after tournament over the course of like 5 years, and it went from like getting stomped, and then like the year after that, it would be like, okay, I pushed him back a step, and that was a win, and that would be for like a year. You know, the 2 tournaments that we fought in for that year, and went against each other. Like, oh yeah, I got him to step back, and then I got him to step back, and I got to throw a shot, and then I got him to step back and covered his sword and jumped him with my dagger, but I didn't kill him because his stick was good and he disengaged, so I need to stick on him more, and it was just like a constant progression of like pushing until I can figure out a strategy that worked.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was doing this. All I knew was, damn it, here comes Bumi again.
You know? Intentional, like that falls into the expert part. I think it's both advanced and expert, but it's really having book on somebody, having understanding the individual. And then like, in my head, it's like, okay, if I touch his sword at all, I need to slam his sword into the dirt and just be chest to chest. If I am those 2 things, he probably won't kill me, and I'll probably kill him. That was very much young me figuring that out. Young in the fencing sense.
I mean, I take pride in that you were learning that skill of putting things like that together. Honestly, I mean, that's something that honestly, that's a huge accomplishment for me. Just being that person.
Oh yeah.
Because being that person over a stretch of 5 years took a lot of effort too.
Oh, absolutely. I in turn, I've told a lot of people, I've told Chad this a few times, but it is now my honor and privilege to be other people's white whale.
Yeah.
Like, people are like, oh, God damn it, it's Bumi again. I'm like, great. Like, come hunt me. I will bring my best every time until I cannot. And it will make your victory when it happens all the more savory, right? It's just going to be better.
You can't, being someone's mountain is very hard, but it's also an honor.
Yeah, it's absolutely an honor. Very few people get that privilege in a kingdom sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like in their whole career, very few people get that privilege, much less in an interkingdom sense.
It is a privilege to be a target.
The privilege to be a target.
Yeah, I think that is almost exclusively a mental part of expert.
Yeah, that is way up there, right? So I can't tell you, like I said, I'm old, right? And when I turned, I think about 36, I started getting a lot more health problems, right? Like not having cartilage in my knee started being a problem, you know? There was so many times it would be super easy to just like fight halfway and take an L and go home. But there were these people there who were fighting their damnedest and doing their best and trying to get up to that expert level and doing their best, the same places I was, right? And I remember people when I was coming up, just not being in the tournament and just not thinking it was a huge deal and not caring about it. And I'm like, I can't be that person. I got to get out there and give my best and give my A game every time, so that when they do beat me, right, then they get a legitimate victory.
Yeah, it means a lot for them.
That's something that we I think had a hard time with in Athelmark is when I was coming up. There's kind of a period of like 2 years after the pandemic where it felt like the top of our fencing community was just not fighting in tournaments. So like when I was kind of just getting into that advanced section where I was like, I really know what I'm doing. I haven't trimmed off all the fat yet, but like I'm pretty dang good. It didn't feel like there was a whole lot of room to go up.
Because they didn't even take the tournament seriously, right? They're just kind of like, huh?
Yeah, for a variety of reasons, we had people stop due to age and health problems. We had some people switch over to heavy, just all sorts of things.
So part of it, the issue, in my opinion, is people have that quite like Dom was saying. It's like maybe he doesn't feel super good that day, or he could be really easy to just not take it seriously. And also, if you go out there and try your hardest, and there is some young person hungry to try to prove themselves, that like they're gunning for you, right? And so and that's a hit to your ego. So it's kind of easier to just like, well, I'll just marshal this tournament, or I'll just sit out, or I'll fight, but I won't try that hard, or whatever. It's like, and you're kind of denying the next generation that opportunity.
Yeah, that's all it is.
It would be easy for me right now to say, oh, it didn't bother me, but like I definitely thought about those things. Like, oh man, here comes Bumi, here comes a Taurus. Like, what if I don't win? It would have been way harder if they were assholes, but thankfully.
John, you're talking about being the top dog and losing to those up and comers.
Being the top dog, like the reason that they step out or they don't fight, I think, is because
what's ego? It definitely is
ego, and it's hard.
It's ego. Every time.
No, really hard to admit that you're not on top anymore.
Mhm.
It really is.
Sure. Yeah, totally.
And I know I'm not like I'm still, I'm not very old. Like I'm 30 years old right now, and I'm still very good at fighting. I'm probably like a lot of years left. So I'm like on the like very early edges of like looking at this. But I've been one of the better fencers for a while now. And so I'm starting to think about that more and more. And I just really want to follow someone more like Dom's footsteps, and then some of the other fighters that I've seen who just kind of quit or whatever. It's like
Yeah.
I'll go out and fight as long as I can and try to hold on to my spot and
Right.
make people take it from me.
Yeah, make
Yeah.
them take it from you. Make them take it
Yes.
from you.
Yes.
And I think that'll
100%.
be fun. And I almost like I don't look forward to it in a certain sense, but I do in another sense, right?
Oh,
Like
absolutely.
Yeah,
It's a
that
bittersweet.
moment.
It's bittersweet, but it's more sweet than bitter.
Yeah.
yeah.
That moment
So
when the next generation comes and wrecks your socks.
So
Yeah.
story time
Yeah.
in Lockhack, right? The people who are good have been the top dogs for a long time. And they have an academy over there that focuses on period fencing and moving up that way and doing demonstrations of period fencing and stuff. So kind of like when the top people, sort of won all the tournaments, and there's like 4 or 5 of them. Then they kind of said, "All right, well now I want to do period stuff," and then that unintentionally became what was seen as important across the
Yeah, the
kingdom,
meta.
Mm,
right? So the middle group, right? The intermediate to lower advanced kind of doesn't exist over there right now.
interesting.
They're kind of building up from the bottom. The pandemic did not help. It also doesn't help that
Of course.
their one kingdom was scattered as far as Virginia to California.
yeah.
But it's a very interesting dynamic over there for me to walk into. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's relevant to this, I think.
Story time. All right. Well, this has been some great discussion that didn't necessarily be all the whole tree here.
Well, when it's framed in this tree, it's very interesting to think about how much I think of advanced and expert folks to have. Like advanced, you're still trimming off the last bit of fat. By expert, you should have your actions put together. And then I'm going to put one over here under training methodologies that both in advanced and expert, right? I'm not going to
Okay.
include in intermediate. You should be willing to be worse for a while when you find something better.
Yes.
And that is something that I had hit me hard. I was like, oh man, I'm good, but I'm not like dominantly good. I'm competitively good. And then it took me a couple of years of being worse to find improvements to be better.
How so?
Spending like a year and change weekly with Torah is a pretty good way to get beat and learn a lot. Like just have my very
Yeah,
few
but you
people
didn't.
hand
You
my
didn't.
ass to me.
You
And so
didn't get less good. You weren't bad.
there was about a year and a half where my mechanics were way less good, and it showed in my tournament performance because they weren't yet ingrained. They weren't yet second nature.
So you were changing a lot of stuff.
I changed a lot.
Okay.
Since the
Okay.
last time I fought you, a ton. Like you notice, I don't hop back. I'm a lot more still, a lot more patient. I don't let people steal ground from me near the same way that I did prior. Things like that.
Okay.
And there's a lot in there that I got beat, and I had to essentially learn to be okay with saying my ego aside, and really be like, okay, I want to improve. This person beats my ass in a percentage that's not respectable. How do I get better?
Okay.
I think that's a good point generally. It's the ability to set your ego aside is
Mhm.
crucial to
Yeah,
become.
I would say probably that is more important because, I mean, everyone's journey until they get up until being an expert is a wave. Is kind of a wave, right, up and down.
Yeah.
No one's as linear.
No.
Point.
Is there anything else y'all want to add to any of the expert stuff or advanced stuff?
Go back up to the categories real quick. Let me think about it.
So we're looking at
Zoom out a little bit.
Yeah, gotcha.
Training, strategy, and tactics. Training methodology, strategy, and tactics. All right.
And then upper body, lower body, footwork, blade work, measure and timing. like by the time you're expert, none of these things really should, unless you're tooling
Yeah,
on
I would
specific things.
footwork. I mean,
By the
if
time you're
your footwork
advanced,
is
should be done.
if your footwork has issues, significant issues, you're not going to get there, right? Like
Yeah, I don't think you hit advanced.
Yeah, you
In
don't.
any reasonable
Yeah.
way. At least high advanced. Maybe.
I think in measure and timing and advanced and expert, I don't really know how to describe this. What's a good way to describe this? Okay, so when I fought one time, I fought Sir Joss, and he was using a buckler,
Mhm.
right? And he's a knight. He knows how to use a buckler, right? He's a pretty big rondel. But in my mind, like the timing and the measure, I knew when I could make his buckler move. So I would hit him where his buckler was in his normal stance, right? So he held it on his left hand, and I would hit him under his left armpit, where his buckler should be carrying it. But I could tell, and I could, manipulate in the measure and timing to get him to move it, and then hit that opening that he created by moving his buckler around. Does that make sense? Like I could see, even though someone's dagger is there, I can get it to move, and I can hit someone right where their dagger is.
Mhm.
And I'm not really sure if there's a good way to describe that, but like the measure and timing for me is like way less like someone's static stance means nothing, right?
Mm.
At that point,
It's like
right?
dynamic openings.
Yeah, dynamic openings, right? Like I can see those, or I can try to create them
Yeah.
more
Would
when I
you-
got up to the expert level.
Would you consider that as part of like invitations and feints? You were
Not necessarily, because it would definitely be like a shot that would kill them to the chest if they didn't parry it, and then I would attack the area where their dagger or buckler moved, right? So, and that's a timing thing, right? So I go
it's like
here, your
predicting what
buckler
they're gonna
moves.
do.
Yeah, and it's forcing them, it's manipulating them too. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but I know that a lot of things go towards timing when I got higher level, right?
Yeah.
John, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yes. I think you put that pretty well.
It's something that I see in a lot of the top level fencers when I fight y'all, when I fight some of the really good fencers around here, is that ability to predict what I'm going to do and respond to it well. That's what I see as someone fighting up to those expert people.
I don't want to touch your main blade with my blade. Just in general. Just so you know.
Is that for me
Mine?
or for
No, for Robert. Specifically for
You don't-
Robert.
okay.
His main blade control is stellar. Your ability
yeah.
to throw a blade, right? The glissande.
Glissande.
Glissande, is that the right word?
Was
Yeah,
that like the
I heard it
chopping
before.
motion with the
I usually
Not
heard
just
it
a
parrying
beat,
away?
but a throw. Is very good. Like you can manipulate blades very well, and so like knowing that, falling under strategies and tactics, and definitely all of the categories before that, my goal is to put you on your back foot where you're weaker and not not play a battle of main blade strengths, because that's your strongest strength in my
Not
opinion. I'll beat you
not
with
thumb
my
wrestle
footwork.
with your swords.
Not sword with swords, yeah. Set a
Yeah.
wall, beat with foot, deliver blow with hand.
I think at a higher level, you start to learn a lot of little tricks, and they're not specific,
Yes.
but there are a lot of little
Mhm.
tricks to allow what you want to happen. Like you kind of can start to force things, and there's like a lot of little ways. And I don't even realize that I know as many ways as I know until I start to kind of like think about how I do stuff when I'm trying to teach someone. I'm like, oh yeah, I do it this way and this way and this way
Mhm.
to try to create. Sometimes it's like a dozen ways to make one action happen that I want.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would call that my flow state, like Boomy was talking about, right? When I get into a fight, like I see openings and things, and I don't really think, oh, there it is, I shall do this. It's just like, the opening is there, and I've hit it. It's kind of a flow thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Something
Yeah,
more
John, that's
Go ahead.
that's something that I've noticed a lot recently is especially fighting against less experienced opponents, is there's so many ways, so many really subtle ways to get them to do things. Little feints, little line switches, stuff like that. Like you said, it's lots of little tricks.
and it's not like. And sometimes I kind of feel like you almost like I could go and I could tell someone every little trick I do, and
Mhm.
some of them would be helpful for them, but a lot of it is figuring out what that stuff is going to be for you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a
And that's
context with
just
your
it.
body and your mind,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which
So
Your weapons.
you know,
Yeah.
your weapons
Yeah.
aren't
I
applicable
would.
to everybody.
Oh, okay. Did we talk about maybe in intermediate or maybe expert of optimizing your weapons, like getting weapons that like fit you and how you fight?
We did not.
that's a good one actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Strategies and tactics, you think?
Maybe.
It's like maybe a different category. Mm,
Yeah, gear is its own category. I don't think it fits
Yeah.
into the skill.
Yeah.
It's not like a skill acquisition so much as like a knowledge and awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like that's leaning into your strength, right? Like knowing what you do and how to
Yeah.
what your muscles are and how they
Yeah.
feel on the sword and what
Yep.
your parrying device of choice is, that kind of thing.
Forward presence versus back weighted.
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. That tends to affect a lot of expert or advanced, I would think.
I find
'Cause, I
that.
mean,
Go
go ahead.
ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was gonna say that I find that kind of gear adjustment to even be even a bigger deal in armored fighting than rapier fighting.
Oh,
Oh,
definitely.
really?
Yeah, by a lot.
Because the shield, there's so much variety in shield shape,
Yep.
and it
Sure.
really dictates a lot of the way you fight.
Or like
So,
weight of sword, single sword.
and then weight of sword. I mean, the sword is
And
important too, but
distribution.
there's so much, and then your armor, how it fits you.
Yep.
Tweaking all of that is like a big deal.
That matters a
And
lot
it's
more.
not to say it's not a big deal in rapier too, but it's just kind of to a lesser degree.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Well, I guess I'll believe you since you're a knight.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But Boomy agreed with me, so and he's a knight.
Oh
There you
yeah,
go.
okay. There you go. There it is. Probably true then.
Yeah, gear management and optimization is definitely its
Yeah.
own.
I would put in like clothes, footwear.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a lot of factors.
Oh,
That's a
let
good
me
one.
tell you, the reduced armor in Lockhack, we didn't have to button my armor doublet.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
isn't
my
it?
god.
Let your forearms, your
Oh.
knee, or your shins breathe a little bit.
Oh, I just, it was so nice to go through an event and not worry about overheating at all. Like, oh my god.
It was pretty great.
Anyway, sorry, side note. Yeah. I was talking about gear and stuff.
No, it's relevant, and that would like that's kind of part of all these little tricks, right? Like little things you learn about how to keep yourself,
Yes. Yeah.
in optimum state. Like that's might border into like tourney mind or tourney
You know what?
performance.
Let's talk
kind of
about
stuff.
that. What did you guys change when you got to advanced to expert about your like tournament day, like event day kind of routine?
Oh, well, so mine actually got less strict the better I got.
Okay. Okay.
Because and it's probably different between advanced and expert. Um when I was advanced, I felt like I was precarious of how I was keeping
Mhm.
my fight. Like if I didn't have the right amount of sleep or water or food or whatever, like I felt like it would fall off.
Could
A cliff.
affect it.
Yeah, and now it's much like I think partially because I'm so much more consistent. I can summon a lot more without
Okay.
it quite the same level of fine tuning for as far as my body goes.
I think training methodologies or something like that, we can put consistency. That is
Oh,
a
yeah.
huge. That's
Yeah,
a huge one, right? Like being consistent and being able to have that consistent level of high performance. Like when I fought Boomy on Thursday, right? It didn't take me anything to get into like tournament go mode. I mean, I gassed out halfway through because I was out of shape, but getting into that, like switching it on, didn't take anything.
Right. Consistent flow state. Nice. All right. I'm at about time where I want to start wrapping up. I'm really happy with what we've come up with today. Lots to
Yeah,
think
thank
about.
you for the format.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks
Totally.
for Eric inviting us and everything. This was a great time.
Is this something
Yeah,
that
good
that
time.
you can publish? And
Yeah,
kind of
I'm gonna clean it up a little bit and
Yeah.
then I'm gonna publish it, probably PDF. We'll
Yeah.
see.
We'll attach it as the image when we share the video, the VOD. I'll put up
Yeah.
the VOD
Yeah,
next
totally.
day or two.
Yeah,
Cool.
I can link it.
Hey,
It'll be fun.
chat. Let's give a quick pause, chat. If there's any questions, drop them now. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we'll do the wrap up.
Who's on? Who's on?
Uh, whomever is
we got 8
on and
people.
listen to our voices, drop your questions, comments for Dom or Robert or John or myself as you desire.
We have Axiom Joe, Marion Grace, Sapper.
Sapper.
Sapper. That looks like sperm. Okay.
Sapperm.
Sapper M18. It's I think it's the name of his like unit in the National Guard or the military, something
of
like
course.
that.
Yeah, I read it as Sapper M18.
Sapper. Okay. All right.
Axiom Joe. Who is Axiom Joe? This is the Robert you're thinking of. I was at 3-day yesterday.
Robert.
Stefan. Oh my gosh. Hey, Stefan. Yes, I had a blast fighting you. That was fun.
Sapper asks specifically to you or John. I think it's myself. What is some advice for transferring fencing skills into heavy? John, go.
So there's a lot that's the same, right? Like just the kind of learning, knowing how to fight, like feeling how that, like how it feels to be in a fight. It's all the same. The biggest issue I personally had was just hitting hard enough, right? Like even if I could do the mechanic correctly, my instinct was, and I still fight this to this day, is to still like not
Yeah.
like to throw it like all the way through them, right?
Yep.
So like that's the biggest thing is to overcome is just to learn. And so one of the
Interesting.
reasons I definitely like Boomy took a different approach to this. Like Boomy still fights sword foot forward, and I switched to left foot forward. And part of that was to kind of like switch it in my head to be like, this is different. So I think it's, if I'm going to sum it up, it would be to try to find the places that are similar, but then also make distinctive change in your head by like be like, this is different enough, like the places that are different, which is usually the calibration and the physicality of heavy fighting.
Yeah.
Kind of having a different switch in your head to be like, this is something like, so you can still bring in what your experience, but you're not like letting that trip you up, because there's, as much as there's good things, there's also things that
Yeah, they're suboptimal.
that can, yeah, suboptimal, like
Mm-hmm.
things that, so it's, there's a lot of benefits and a lot of downsides, and kind of navigating that, so kind of figuring out where that is. So some of it is like, you have to kind of separate some of it in your mind. At least for me, it was like, I have to be like, this is going to be a different game, and I can lean on my skills, but I can't do it too much, or I'll like kill my progress. So
I have found, I can't speak for too much Inner Kingdom. I've only done a relatively lower amount of Inner Kingdom armored compared to my fencing. But one of the things that I found is that armored fighters, especially as you get through beginner, intermediate, and into advanced, pretty well into advanced, folks are not nearly as tight as fencers are in general about their footwork. And because of that, you can control the measure that you want in armored way better than most. And for that reason, until you get to the high advanced, low, or throughout expert armored fighter, you get to really abuse your footwork from a fencing background. And that allowed me to really make some what other people describe as like a meteoric climb in the Shiv world, because the perception was, oh, they're already very good, but a lot of it was just carrying over footwork that I have done for well over a decade now into another sport.
So, question on that: like, when did you guys feel like you were making progress up this beginner, intermediate, advanced kind of ladder in heavy fighting?
Mm-hmm.
When did you feel that? How quickly did you feel that happen? Because I mean, you were barely starting heavy fighting when I left for Australia.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
So I would say, if I'm in super honesty, it did not take. It took almost no time to be into the intermediate stage, switching
Yep.
over. Like,
Okay.
like very little, very little effort. Probably faster than the 6 months to be like to an intermediate level. Just because
Okay.
you knew how to fight, and I feel like Boomy probably, my guess would agree with this,
Yeah,
right? Just
absolutely.
kind of knowing how to fight. So it really was just kind of almost intermediate from the beginning.
Mm.
And then and then going through intermediate into the advanced was the and I definitely don't think I'm an expert heavy fighter, just for the record. Like
Same.
low.
Oh,
I
So,
are you
mean,
okay? Pause,
I mean,
John. Are you top
I
8 kingdom?
mean,
Because your
what?
fucking performance at Warlords and into Crown was pretty good.
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to like really break. I'd really have
Yeah,
to like. I
yeah.
haven't really thought about
I
it, if
think
I'm
a
being
lot of
honest.
people also didn't fight, so I'm with you. I feel very much the way you do. I think I'm advanced, not expert, and there's a lot of folks that didn't. Even though my numbers show really well, there's a lot of people
Yeah,
who don't compete in those
I kind of feel like that
tournaments.
way.
Yeah,
The thing
I
is,
get
there's
you.
such in Onstura, there's like our top fighters are so much better. Like there's such a huge gap because we
Yeah,
have
it's
some
not
like
close. Yeah,
truly world class heavy fighters in
yeah,
Onstura right now, and I think Atlantia is similar. So to feel like like there's with Sven and our Ragnar here, like
yeah.
yeah.
and Lachlan and
Monsters.
Jason, it's like
Yeah, fucking
I'm nowhere
monsters.
close to being as good as they are.
Right.
Um, but
So it still feels like there's a gap between you and the Uber Duke, but
yeah,
you still feel
so
like you came in pretty hot, like as far as yeah, okay, makes sense.
yeah, like a lot of the basics stuff learned really quick because
Yep.
I just knew how
You
like
know how to fight and you
all-
know how to
it was
learn.
like easy to knew how to fight. Someone showed me the move and I was like, oh cool, I don't like I don't need a ton of practice to be okay at it.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of knew how to do it. I knew how to learn, knew how to move my body,
Yep.
and I knew how to the
And
basic idea of like
you know
hit
the
someone.
advanced fighting, like you know strategies and tactics.
Yeah, and
You
there's definitely I think I've
that
won or
crosses
done
over.
well in a couple of tournaments against fighters that were like a few years ago that were like other Squire, unbelts and stuff that were probably
Mm.
in some ways more skilled technically than me,
Yeah,
but
Mm.
just didn't have the experience of being in high pressure situations to the
that
same
is
level.
exactly my journey as well. Yeah,
Whereas
You
like,
think?
well,
Okay.
copy
been
paste.
in I've been in tournaments. I've been fighting tournaments, since I was 15 years old, and
There are
like in the
still
SCA.
unbelts in Atlantia that I know I am technically worse in, like mechanically
Yeah.
and technical skill. And then
Hmm.
I can name like 5 off the top of my head that are
You have better
yet to be
tournament
belted. But
performance
I am
than
a
them.
way better tournament fighter because I
Hmm.
have the tournament mindset of how do I go dissect the person in front of me with my strengths against their weaknesses, and it's that simple.
Gotcha.
Whereas other people rely on the combo, or like I got fast hands. Let me get into B and fight you or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Uh,
We have a question. Another
yeah,
question.
we do. Chat asks, Axio asks, I am really interested in doing cut and thrust, but I don't want to slow my growth as a rapier fighter. Is that likely to happen? I would like to kick this to Robert and Dom.
I think it depends on how you approach cut and thrust. Because cut and thrust is kind of a strict superset, I guess, of SCA Rapier. You can do everything in SCA, everything you can do in SCA Rapier, you can do in cut and thrust. So if you take a really dominant style in cut and thrust, and you don't do any of the kind of thrust focused mechanics that are best in Rapier, I think that could slow down your rapier progress. But I think that if you take a balanced approach to cut and thrust, I don't think it's an issue.
I don't actually fight much cut and thrust, but I will say this: that it will slow you down. Okay, but it will not be less gratifying for you while you're doing it. Okay, you the amount of time and investment between intermediate and expert is pretty huge, right? As far as putting yourself into it, right? So I would say that it will slow you down, but the cut and thrust game is very rewarding for those who get good at it, and it will not hinder your progress, right? You're still doing the same thing, you're still learning the same kind of stuff. It won't hinder it, but it will slow you down just because it will split your focus.
Yep, I agree with Dom.
Uh,
It's just an opportunity cost, not a
Yeah.
Yeah.
not a detriment.
And
Yeah, good.
I'll add one thing, and this is kind of to a little bit of what Robert said, is it really depends on the kind of CNT you're doing. Like, if
Mhm.
you're doing long sword, that will slow your progress more because it is more different than rapier. Or if you're but it, like side sword is more similar to rapier. But you could also just do rapier
With the cuts.
in CNT
In
rule
a cut and
set,
thrust, yeah.
Right.
and then you're really slowing your progress almost in zero because you're basically fighting the same way. So it really just depends on what kind of CNT you want, because CNT is just a rule set, and you can use any kind of weapon in that rule set. So it really
Mhm.
depends on the weapon form you're fighting in CNT.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I will add that in Athemark now is a great time to start doing cut thrust because I feel like we're really pushing hard for it. In the next couple of years, I think it'll start to be a big thing.
Cut and thrust, I gotta say, is
Look, man, if I had a nickel for every time I've heard some kingdom say that,
Dude, we're trying.
it is. I think if it's done well, it is an extension of what the weapon already does.
Yes.
It is
Fair enough.
not in opposition. It is you thrust and secondarily you cut.
Yes.
The weapon is already designed to do so.
That's if you're doing rapier in
If you're doing
CNT.
rapier or really honestly side sword as well.
Even
'Cause
side sword.
Side sword and
yeah.
saber also thrust and cut. They do both
But if-
things well.
If someone means CNT and they really mean they're doing longsword,
Yeah, longsword
that's
is its own beast.
pretty different weapon form, right?
Yes. Yeah, agreed.
But it's still fighting, so it won't
Yes.
like it'll still help because you're still fighting.
Yeah,
And fighting.
yeah.
So it's
Everything in these first squares, the lower body, upper body, and measure and timing in intermediate and beginner, just apply. They
Yeah.
just across the board apply.
Yeah.
So
And I think learning one set, even if the specifics are different, learning one set teaches you how to learn a set. Like you were talking about for rapier to heavy,
Yeah,
you pick up a lot of stuff
learn how to
faster.
learn.
Yeah.
Sure.
That journey
Um,
is huge.
Yes.
I think for everybody,
Mm.
the first learning how to learn and achieve high performance is makes every subsequent learning journey significantly easier.
It's like a
by
cheat code for
years.
life.
Yeah.
God, when that light bulb goes on, though, everything gets so much more fun.
It's crazy. It's not close. Yeah, it's crazy. I feel like that's like your journey, Robert, in your calisthenics and mobility goals are easier from fencing and vice versa. Like
Yeah.
the ability to
Yeah.
learn
Knowing how to
learn.
apply myself, how to
Yeah.
learn.
How to
Yeah,
do progressive
100%.
overload and do
Mhm.
so in a measured way and set metrics and all that.
Yeah. Keep the ego out of it too much.
And keep
Yeah.
your ego out of it. Be willing to backslide a little for a better version of the thing you're doing, etc. No.
That's something that most people learn when they hit like they get stuff that works against like 70% of the people. Then they hit that top level and they try to pull it out, and someone's like, "Nope." Blink. That's usually when they have to like, "Oh, I have to go re-examine things."
Yes. That is, I think, probably the separation between advanced, like high advanced and expert, is your willingness to go undo and redo some very core parts of your kit.
It can happen in intermediate too.
That's true. Definitely.
It can happen in intermediate when you get like a big fish, small pond.
I think
Yeah.
you like that's a constant going back and trimming and reinventing
Oh yeah.
and bettering your own action set.
yeah.
No. I've been my first tournament was in 2001, and I'm still learning. So
As it should be. Yeah.
I'll also add, since this whole stream was to discuss teaching philosophies and stuff, like I will reevaluate how I teach things, like wording, and like if I figure out, oh, I think this is a better way to do it for myself, then I like obviously teach it differently. So like I'm trying to not be so sold on a certain way.
Yep.
that is so subjective to who you're teaching to.
Yeah.
This exercise is really good for that. Like
Yeah.
having to phrase
Oh, yeah.
your teachings in a concise and meaningful way.
Yeah, this has been a great exercise. Thank you so much, Robert.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
I
you all for doing
appreciate
it. Figuring it out
Yeah,
with me.
this was a
I didn't
blast.
have a whole vision when we started.
Well, it kind of comes together, right, as we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Chat,
Cool.
thank you for hanging out with us this evening. I'll put the VOD out. Robert, if you want to, we can attach this image in
Yeah,
some
sure.
way to the VOD so that people can see it. We'll push it
Yeah.
out everywhere. That way people can watch this. As always, thank you for hanging out. And I hope to see everybody in chat in the next stream.
Tell your friends.
Yeah. All right. Take it easy, y'all. Thank you for the bits. Good night. All right.
Chat.
Yep. Good night. Good night.
Good night.